Zoom recording. All right, we are recording. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Okay, this is Cynthia Richardson. I'm the acting chair for the meeting because Leif Hubbard, who's a former AMPAC, Airport Master Plan Advisory Committee, AMPAC, Wisconsin DOT member, is no longer on our formerly 12-person committee. So this is our first AMPAC meeting in 2020. We met 3 times in 2019, in April, in June, and July. So I would like to welcome 2 new members to the AMPAC. And John Schaefer, who I understand is the former dean of the UW School of Music, has joined in place of Leif Hubbard. And then in September, the City Common Council added a 13th member to AMPAC, Robert Burke, who is an alderman and also a member of the Middleton Area Development Corporation Board of Directors. So welcome, Robert. And I do think, Mark, it would be good, it was noted at the council meeting about the MADC Board of Directors role. So I think on the city website, it would be good under the Airport Master Plan members to note that and in the record tonight. As Deanna Porter is currently on the AMPAC and is the MADC representative as well. So that's 2 representatives from that organization. And I would also just like to mention before Mark takes roll for attendance, hopefully all of you received the joint Towns of Middleton and Springfield letter today that includes an independent analysis of the Mead and Hunt revised July 2020 Chapter 2 forecast by a Town of Middleton airport consultant. So I look forward to our meeting tonight. And Mark, would you like to take the roll call, please?
Sure. Bob Bartholomew?
Here.
Ray Fay?
Here.
Mike Frank?
Here.
Jade Hofeld?
Here.
Leif Hubbard? Oh, I'm sorry, no, Leif is gone. Julie Leffler? Julie? Oh, and she's muted, and let me, okay, I just unmuted her. Still can't hear you, Julie.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now that's perfect. Thank you.
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Rich Morey?
Here.
Kevin Munson?
Here.
Deanna Porter?
Here.
Dan Dreesen?
Here.
Cynthia Richardson?
Present.
Mark Warschauer?
Here.
And Robert Burke?
Present.
And John Schaefer, sorry.
John Schaefer's here too.
Yep.
Last but not least.
So we have all 13 members present.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
Item number 1, election of committee officers, chair and vice chair. So I was the vice chair when Leif Hubbard was the chair, and that is why I'm the presiding officer until we elect new officers. I am willing and interested in serving in either capacity. So what is the pleasure of the committee? Are there any motions?
I have a motion.
It's not just a technical correction. You're asking for nominations.
Nominations. Thank you, Mark.
I have a nomination.
Yes, please go ahead.
Can you hear me, everybody?
Yes.
Yes, can you say your name though too, just
This
because?
is Julie Loeffler speaking, and I would like to move that Cindy Richardson be nominated for the chair of this committee. And my reason is simply that we've been over a year without a meeting. We don't have a lot of continuity, but we do have one person who's been an acting chair, a vice chair, and also is the chair of the Town of Middleton. She has a lot of experience, and I have found her guidance very helpful. So that's my motion.
Is there a second?
No, I'd like to, this is Mark Warschauer. I'd like to nominate Robert Burke.
We'll need a second.
Yes, we need it. Is there a second for Julie Loeffler's motion?
My understanding is that for nominations, you do not need a second.
That's my understanding too, but if somebody wishes to be recorded as seconding, we can do that too if you want.
I think it would be good to be on the safe side. Is there a second for Julie Loeffler's motion?
Mr. Bartholomew just did.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Bartholomew. And the nomination by Mark Warschauer of Robert Burke, is there a second for that?
This is Mike Frank. I'll second that.
There's a second by Mike Frank. Are there any other nominations? I would like to also nominate Kevin Munson as chair. Is there a second for that?
I'll second that. This is Bob Bartholomew.
Bob, thank you. All right, so I guess we can vote in order.
You should ask if there are other nominations.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any other nominations? All right, hearing none. So the first one is Julie Loeffler's motion for the vice chair to become the chair, who's the acting chair tonight, myself, Cynthia Richardson, with a second from Mr. Bartholomew. Is there discussion? So do you want to take a roll call vote, Mark?
That's what I'm thinking of doing for, I mean, we could handle each nomination. I could ask every member who they are supporting for the chairperson role.
Well, except, no, because the first and the second motion, the outcome is dependent on the third one. So I think we need to do them in order.
The way nominations work, ideally we would all have, we'd be present together voting at the same time. Okay, if you want to do it that way, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense logically. So if there,
but just so we understand just so I understand for the record, for record keeping, if nobody, the person who becomes chair has to receive 7 votes, a majority vote. That's the
okay.
And so in theory, since there are 3 people nominated and you divide it 4, 4, and 5, let's just say, since that adds up to 13, somebody becomes chair in the first round, then there becomes another vote.
But you start from scratch then. If the first vote succeeds, then it's over, right? If it doesn't succeed, then you go on to the second one from scratch. And if that one doesn't succeed, then you go to the third one and start from scratch.
I've never seen it done in that way, but if you wish to, so you're the acting chair, so if you wish to have me do it that way, I will call the roll just for your nomination. That's fine with me. So if that's what you're asking.
I think that makes the most logical sense. So is there any discussion on the nomination for me to become the chair? Hearing none. Mark, you want to take the roll call?
Okay, so Bartholomew?
Cindy?
Yeah, he's doing it the way that I was anticipating. Okay, so Bob is voting for Cindy. I guess alphabetically we have Robert Burke next.
No. Or are we doing it Cynthia's way, or are we doing it where we just name a name?
I think.
Well, we're not going to have a right outcome if we all just name a name.
Right. That's why I'm trying to stick with
So
what Cynthia just asked us to do.
Yes. So this is a standalone for the nomination for me to be chair. So you can vote yes or no. Just standalone.
Okay. So no.
Okay.
All right. I'm quickly putting everybody in order on my screen so I can keep track of the vote this way. All right. So next we have Ray Fay. No, I'm sorry, Dan Dreesen. Dan Dreesen is next.
Yes.
Okay. Ray?
No.
Mike?
No.
Jade?
No.
Julie?
Yes. Did you hear me say yes?
Yep, sorry. I'm just making sure I'm keeping in order here. Rich Morty?
Fine.
No.
Kevin Munson?
No.
Deanna Porter?
No.
Cynthia?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
And John Schaefer. I missed John, and you're going to be on my list next time in the right order. So John?
Okay, no.
Okay. Thank you. So I have
9 no's and 1, 2, 3, 4 yeses. So the motion fails.
Yep.
All right, so let's go to the second one. The nomination for Robert Burke and seconded by Mike Frank. I'm sorry, Mark Warshar nominated Robert Burke, seconded by Mike Frank. Is there discussion? All right, hearing none, you want to take a roll call vote, Mark?
Sure. So on this vote for Robert Burke, Bob, you're first.
No.
Robert.
Yes.
Dan.
No.
Ray.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Rich.
Yes.
Jade.
Yes.
Julie,
No.
Rich Moore.
Didn't you just call me?
You already voted.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I knew I had one too many here. Kevin. Kevin
Yes.
for Robert Burke. Okay.
Yeah, yes. Sorry.
Deanna,
Yes.
Cynthia,
No.
John,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay. So we have out of the 13 votes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 yeses. This is what I count. So
And 4 no's. Okay. So I guess that means that Robert Burke, you are the chair. Congratulations.
Thank
And
you,
there's no
Cynthia.
need to, and there's no need to vote on the third one. Okay, good. So are there nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Cindy Richardson.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Robert would be asking that question now since he's become chair.
All right.
Okay, and thank you, Cynthia, for showing me how to do it, because it always takes a little bit of time for me to get used to this. Yeah, I would. Are there any nominations for the vice chair role?
I nominate Cindy Richardson as Bob Bartholomew.
Okay, we have a nomination for Cynthia. Is there? I don't think there's a need for a second, but let's do this. Is there a second for that nomination?
Dan Drazen seconds.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Are there any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Kevin Munson.
Okay, we have a nomination for Kevin Munson.
I'm sorry. Could you please speak your name?
Richard Morey.
Thank you.
It's Mark Warschauer, and I'll second that.
Okay, got it. Ask for any other nominations then. Robert.
Oh, thank you. Yes, are there any other nominations? We have two nominated candidates at this time. Okay, hearing none. Let's go through
Both. Okay. So this is voting for using the same procedure we did a moment ago. We'll have Cynthia is the first person who is nominated. So Bob Bartholomew, you're first with voting.
Cindy Richardson.
Okay. Robert.
No.
Dan.
Yes.
Ray.
No.
Mike.
No.
Rich Morey.
No.
I
Dave.
got skipped if you're in alphabetical order. You got Rich, and
yep,
then aren't I supposed to be there in there
Mark,
somewhere?
You are. Sorry, I would have gotten.
Okay, no worries.
Yep. Okay, Julie, I'm sorry.
No worries. Yes.
Did I? Jade Hofeld?
No.
Two. Kevin?
Yes.
Deanna?
No.
Deanna?
No.
No. Okay, Cynthia?
Yes.
John Schaefer?
No.
And Mark Warschauer?
No.
All right, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses, which means 8 no's.
Let's continue on then and have a vote for the second nominated candidate, which is Kevin Munson.
Bob Bartholomew?
No.
Robert Brooke?
Yes.
Dan Drayton?
No.
Ray Fay?
Yes.
Mike Frank?
Yes.
Jade Hofeld,
Yes.
Gary Leffler,
No.
Rich Maury,
Yes.
Kevin Munson,
Yes.
Deanna Porter,
Yes.
Cynthia Richardson,
No.
John Schaefer,
Yes.
Mark Warschauer.
Yes.
And we got it in alphabetical order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 yeses, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, it sounds like we have both a chair and a vice chair.
Yes.
Thank you all for running, and congratulations to Mr. Munson. Okay, so let's move on to item 2 under discussion, approval of the July 18th, 2019 meeting minutes. And let's use the meeting minutes that have been, or let's talk about starting with the meeting minutes that have been amended by Cynthia Richson.
So Chair Burke, if I might, there was a little misunderstanding between Mr. Opitz and I, so there's a little correction on the last page.
Okay, I'm getting to them. I pulled up the wrong minutes. Sorry about that.
It's difficult to communicate by email sometimes.
Okay. Sure, you may have to walk us through
they're on the
any
screen
changes.
now. Cynthia,
Okay.
go ahead. They're on the screen.
Oh, sure, okay. So on page 2, the word private, it just wasn't descriptive. It's really the Middleton Area Good Neighbors Citizen Group Survey. So I just clarified that so it didn't look so mysterious, like what private outside money is coming in to do some survey or something.
Certainly.
And then on page 4, I think is the next one. I re-watched the video because the minutes didn't really capture my recollection. So this is from rewatching the video. The confusion was over which survey Mead and Hunt was using in their presentation last July. So I just clarified that. And in the tape, there's a lot of discussion about survey 1, question 34, the Polco survey, where 84% of the current users of Maury Airport said that the runway length of these are excellent or good. And I did say in the tape that the way the information was being presented was misleading. So that was really the essence of that whole discussion. And so I had him crossed off the survey responses in the presentation, and and I put the video meeting point if somebody wanted to zoom in to verify it or read it, listen to it again, they could. And then under the motion by Leffler Richardson, I guess that's the same. So underneath that, I again took the word private and made it what it was, which was Middleton Area Good Neighbors Citizen Group Survey. And then the following page 5, I re-listened to the tape and I put the video in there with the time. When the chair of Springfield, Jim Pulvermacher, said that he asked the city to commit not to use eminent domain condemnation to acquire land needed for any airport improvements, I said that I would like to echo Pulvermacher's requests and comments, and I just put in paren for clarification about eminent domain condemnation as it then relates to the town of Middleton, since he was from the town of Springfield.
So
and then on the last...
I had a question about that, Mark Warschauer.
Sure.
Was that echo as part in the video, or is that just a follow?
No. It was the actual words I used. I said, and I would like to echo Jim's comments, and I mean, it's pretty much exactly what's there.
All right, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And then the last page, I listened to the video again and just made the words were in the video, and I didn't mean to have Mark cross off and the 300 billion micrograms are emitted each year by small aircraft in Dane County. She listed schools and community facilities near the airport and said that can stay there. But yeah, can stay there. And then, so that's according to the video, and you're welcome to listen to it.
Oh, I listened to it. I agree with that. I was surprised when you didn't indicate that as part of the change that you requested.
Yeah, no, that's sometimes, yeah, sorry. My bad.
Well, as you said, Cynthia, communicating via email sometimes is cumbersome.
Yes, thank you.
Can we go up two pages earlier? The one question I had was similar to Mark Warshauer's because I didn't listen to it word for word, but this one prior to the one that Mark asked about. Sorry, one page higher.
1 page higher. Okay.
Okay, maybe, yeah, there. The similar question I have here, just because I checked some of the other places, but I don't remember this one. Was it explicitly stated in the video about the question number 34?
Yes, and I was holding it up and said it about 3 or 4 times.
Okay. I'm happy to hear it. I just want to make sure that the meeting minutes are reflective.
I don't know, but thank you.
Thank you. So those are the recommended, I guess, modifications.
And Robert, I have a question for clarification. I wasn't sure if Cynthia finished going through the Michelle Lewis comment, because she talked about, you talked about reinserting the 300 billion comments, but you didn't say anything about the last sentence, which said, she said that the effects of lead exposure cannot be corrected.
Oh, yes, please. Yes, you can leave all of that. That is what she said. I'm sorry. Yes, you don't need to cross anything off there.
So remove
Thank
all
you.
the stricken language. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, so we have amended meeting minutes. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing no questions.
I'll make a motion to approve them. This is Member Richardson.
Thank you, Cynthia.
It's Mark Warshauer, I'll second.
Thank you, Mark. We have a first and a second. Sorry, this is when I'm supposed to ask, are there any questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the amended meeting minutes of July 18th, 2019, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
If there's anybody who would like to register a no vote, please register that now. Hearing none, I would say that the meeting minutes have been approved. Thank you.
This is Dan Drazen. I'm going to abstain because I wasn't there.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Dan.
Jim Polmark was in my spot.
Ah, okay. That helps.
Even for abstentions.
Just so you know, Dan, under Robert's Rules of Orders, that's not required. We've asked our town attorney, but you are free to do that. So I just wanted to let you know that, just in case.
Okay, I've read them, so I'll agree then. I'll vote yes.
Oh, okay. So I think we have a
is anyone abstaining then?
I'm abstaining, John Schaefer.
I thought I heard that. Okay.
It wasn't there.
Okay.
Well, it's not a requirement, John, but that's okay.
Okay, well then I'll.
Well,
So I'm recording it as 12 yeses and 1 abstention, unless anybody's hearing it differently. Okay.
okay. Wonderful. Moving on to item number 3 under discussion is presentation and discussion of the FAA approved aviation demand forecasts, chapter 2.
Greg, you have the screen if you wish to use it.
Thanks, Mark. I'll try to share my screen here now. Can folks see that all right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, we can.
Okay, real good. I'm going to take the presentation to a full screen mode.
And to anyone participating by phone, I'd be happy to arrange this to be emailed to you, and we'll put it on our website.
Well, let's just pause for a moment there and ask, for those people participating by phone, please indicate now if you cannot see the Airport Master Plan Advisory Committee document that is on that we're going to be reviewing.
I mean, Mark, Is there any way to email it to them right now? Because if they're on the phone, they could go maybe to their computer if they wanted to see it.
That's why I'm asking. I don't want to go through this entire meeting and then find out that somebody was looking at a blank screen the whole time.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
So yeah, let's find out. Speak up now if you need Mark to email something to you.
Yeah, this is
I
Dan
do.
Drazen. If you could, please.
Dan and Cynthia, did I hear?
I think it was Julie. Was it
Oh.
Julie?
No, it was not.
Oh, somebody else.
Kathy Wolf.
Right.
Are you only referring to committee members?
No, I think we
Oh,
can send
okay.
other people if you request it and we have a working email address for you.
Well, you should.
It's a
Do
public
you need it again?
Let me defer to Mark as he's looking up emails.
Sure.
Well, yeah. And Greg, are you going to send it to me then too?
Well, I did send you an email of it earlier today, Mark. I can email it to you again if you'd like.
Oh, that's fine. And if there's, I thought maybe there was a change. Okay, here it is.
Robert, could I make a suggestion? This is Richard Morey speaking.
You may.
I would like to have the committee and the people in the audience hold their questions till the end of the presentation to actually allow Mead and Hunt and Greg to go through his presentation. We can take notes, we can ask questions at the end. I know how this works otherwise, and I am hoping to have a meeting done in a reasonable time and a bit more efficient than we have had in the past.
That's a good idea.
We are going through some guidelines as the project staff will go through the guidelines, and that was going to be suggested as well. I did forward it to the presentation to all AMPAC members just now. I don't have an email address handy for Kathy. I don't record email addresses, and I tried typing your name in, and well, here, let me do a search on my email. Maybe I'll find one for you that way.
I'm on all of your e-lists,
well,
including the Airport Advisory Committee meetings.
Yeah, but it gets generated from a different system.
I see.
Here's what I'll do. I will quickly put it on our website. I'm sorry, I guess I could have thought of that ahead of time. I just thought people are participating by Zoom. It didn't occur to me that. Anyway, I'll quickly get it on our website. If you want to start talking, Greg, that's fine, and I can. I'll do this while you're talking. Actually, I'm first anyway.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Mark, did you want to touch on those two slides, and maybe I would stop sharing here and you could touch on those first?
Oh, I thought you had those too.
I do have them. I can present those.
Just keep going, because I don't want to transition again. It's I just don't want to make a mistake. So.
Oh, one second here. It's no problem to bring them up here.
Plus, I'm working on posting it on the internet. Oh, I got it.
I can touch on these if you'd like, Mark, while you're working on that.
Yeah,
and,
no, sure. Just go ahead. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. So these are just a couple of slides from an earlier meeting. They were really just trying to touch base on the purpose of developing the AMPAC, and just thought I'd kind of walk through these bold items real quick. So the AMPAC was formed to act as a major resource for airport staff and consultants in developing alternatives for study and ultimately recommendations for action. As a body, the AMPAC will be consulted throughout the study, and members' views will be carefully considered. Wherever possible, the AMPAC will attempt to reach consensus. Where there are differences of opinion, minority positions will be fully recognized and documented. We want to remind that the decision-making body is the Middleton Common Council upon a recommendation from the Airport Commission. This next slide mentions that members will recognize the legitimacy, the interest, and the opinions of others, taking time to listen to and understand comments from all participants. When making public statements, members will speak only for themselves, not for the committee or for any other member. And members of the general public attending to this meeting will be able to speak after the committee has gone through the agenda items. So those are just a couple of points that we had kind of presented at earlier meetings. We thought it'd be good to just kind of refresh and remind those. And I don't know if there was any comment on those, Mark or Robert.
I'm fine. That's where what we have our agenda set up to say is that public comment is held till the end.
That's how it is set up, yes. And at Cynthia's request, we added that item, and so it's at the end of the agenda.
I think it's important that we hear from the public, but I think it's also important that we, as members of this committee, are able to hear and understand what's going on in the presented document here that is being presented by Greg and others from Mead and Hunt, maybe. And for that, I think that requires the committee members to have kind of a focus on the presentation as it is without interruption. So let's follow the meeting agenda as provided, and just please, if you're in the audience, if you have some comments or questions, write a note to yourself what the topic is about, and so that we can come back to it and not miss those comments. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to go back to the presentation then itself, and go ahead and get right into it here, if that's all right.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for your time. This is our fourth meeting, and we realize it's been a long time since we last met. I just want to touch on a few of the agenda items that we want to go through here. We just had a couple of housekeeping items we want to touch on at the onset of the presentation. I then would like to introduce the members of Mead and Hunt and Josh Holbrook from the state, and talk about the timeline of the review process. I then would like to get into the role of forecasts, why we do them, and what role they play in the master plan process. We would then like to talk about the history, the recent history of activity that's occurred at the airport over the past 10 years. And from that, what we've sort of derived as indicators of demand at the airport. And then with that background, I'd like to then just very quickly go through what the forecasted data results were as approved by the FAA. And we'd talk about the based aircraft. We'll talk about the forecasted operations and the different categories of operations, and then talk about the design aircraft that is applicable for Middleton. So that's the basis of the presentation. I'm really hoping to get through this quickly in 15 or 20 minutes. It's really intended to be kind of a high-level summary of the chapter itself. And then after that, like I say, we'll open it up for questions, and we can go back to any of these slides thereafter. And then following the round of questions, we'll then talk about where we go from here, the next steps and the schedule.
Greg, before you start, I would direct people to the Airport Master Plan webpage. I'm just double checking that it's there, but it should be there. Yeah, it is there. It is right at the top under latest update, the first link that's there. So thanks for your patience.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So yeah, just a few housekeeping items. I think I touched on a few of these, but the meeting tonight is of course being held virtually to comply with recommendations to limit the spread of COVID-19. You know, given this format, as I mentioned earlier, we'd love to just have a 20-minute time frame here to go through these slides, to give an overview, and then open it up for questions. The focus of tonight's meeting and our presentation is on the FAA approved forecasts, and we would really ask that your questions and the discussion be kept to that subject. Following the presentation, we'll start by addressing questions that were received in advance of the meeting, and we did receive one. As a reminder, the FAA is required to approve two parts of the master plan process. One is the forecast chapter, and the other is the airport layout plan that is kind of the culmination of the master planning process at the end. The Chicago Airports District Office of the FAA approved the forecasts on July 30th. So as such, because the FAA is the approving entity for the forecast, the presentation that we're giving on the forecast tonight are for informational purposes only. We are not seeking any action from the AMPAC on these forecasts, but we do want to present these forecasts and provide an opportunity for the members to, ask any clarifying questions you may have. So with that brief housekeeping items, I now want to introduce our team. So myself, Greg Stern, I was the primary author of the forecasts, but received quite a bit of help from Rick Dunkelberg and Barbara Michael, also of Mead & Hunt, who are also on the phone here with me tonight. Rick and Barbara are subject matter experts in airport planning. They've had a lot of experience on multiple airport master plans, and I owe them a great deal of gratitude and assistance in kind of addressing the FAA comments and getting to the approved forecast that we're at. Also on the phone with us tonight is Josh Holbrook from the Bureau of Aeronautics. Mead & Hunt and Josh with the state and working with the city and the FAA. This was a collaborative process working through these forecasts. It was truly a team effort here. So I want to talk now just a little bit about the timeline that went behind the forecasts. The initial draft of these forecasts was submitted in October of 2018. So that's quite a ways back. But we did not receive any initial comments from the FAA until the following year, until August of 2019. The comments that we received at that time were largely based on how the existing operations at Middleton were being reported. And with the airport being a non-towered facility, there just are not accurate counts. There are no counts of the day-to-day or even annual traffic volumes. There is a reporting mechanism. It's the 5010 reporting process, but it's it's largely estimates, and it's estimates that are worked out through the Bureau and in kind of working with the airport, the people familiar with the day-to-day operations of the airport. So when we had those comments, there was some time of like, well, how are we going to quantify the activity at Middleton? And it took some time to try to build consensus. Are we going to do counts? That'll obviously take some time, take a lot of money and effort. And so there was a process in trying to really figure out how we were going to quantify the operations at the airport. Once we sort of figured that out and how we were going to go about it, then there was the actual work of doing it. And it really involved kind of the outreach to the airport, looking at the flight plans filed, trying to work with the airport on fuel sales, and working with all that data to come up with our best estimate of operations. And we looked at 2019 specifically as our base year. So working through that, we then issued a revised draft. We had some follow-up comments from the FAA in June. We replied to those in July, and we received the approved letter from the FAA in July 30th of 2020. So that's a little bit of the background and why it's been so long since we last met. With that background, I don't want to just talk a little bit about the role of the forecasts and why they do them, what purpose they serve. The forecasts are intended to form the basis for future demand-driven facility needs. And that'll be, our next chapter is looking at facility requirements. But the forecasts also provide data from which to estimate impacts. So for example, we need to know, how many future operations can be anticipated to model noise contours and noise levels and how much traffic is occurring. One important thing to remember in these forecasts is that these numbers are not exact. They're not intended to be exact, and we're not saying that we're going to have a perfect prediction of the future, but they're instead developed to indicate a reasonable projection of future activity based on demand indicators. The forecasts, are developed in short, medium, and long range segments. The short term being 0 to 5 years, the medium range being 5 to 10, and the long-term range being the 10 to 20. The master plan planning horizon is that 20-year horizon. So with that, I now want to just talk about the recent activity that's been occurring at the airport. And this comes straight out of the chapter 2. And each of these columns here are different data, regarding the activity at the airport. And the first column there is labeled total ops. It's short for total operations. And I think it's good to remind folks that an operation is defined as one takeoff or one landing. And so if you look at that column, it's showing 40,510 operations year after year after year being reported. And like I said, that was really one of the sticky points with the FAA, is that we know that the activity has not been that consistent, but that was what was reported, and so that last number there, the 41,342 with the asterisk by it, that is reflective of the inventory efforts that were done to really, dig in deeper and try to find out, how many people are operating and to what levels. And a lot of that effort was sort of documented in the Appendix A and is talked about in the chapter. But what we came to find is that, the numbers weren't terribly off. When we dug in, that 41,000 is in the realm, just over the 40,000 mark. Some of the other activity to talk about are the instrument operations, and that's, the IFR is the next column there, instrument flight rules. Middleton, Maury sees about 3,000 instrument flight operations a year, although the past recent years have shown that, below average. The next column is freight operations, and this is kind of a new recent development for the airport. With the increase in e-commerce, with more and more people buying online, and the airport's proximity to the UPS delivery center there in Middleton, there are two primary operators, freight runners and pro air cargo consultants, who are making, between the two, daily deliveries. And so that's one of the bigger growth things that we've seen over the past 10 years, is this sort of increase in freight deliveries. The next two columns, jet ops and turboprop ops, we've sort of identified those because, at Middleton, those are really the design critical aircraft, the most demanding aircraft. Jet ops have averaged right around 400 operations a year. The turboprop operations just above 400. In recent years, we've seen jet ops kind of be below average, but we've seen the turboprop operations actually be higher. When you look at them together, jets and turboprops are both turbine-powered aircraft, right around 1,000 operations a year. 2016 saw the highest combined total of those. The next two columns are showing fuel sales. Middleton sells two kinds of fuel. They sell Jet A fuel and they sell 100 low lead. Really consistent fuel numbers, combined right around 100,000 gallons a year. When you look at both of them, 2019 was the highest volume of fuel sold in the past 10 years. And then the last category there, the based aircraft, the airport has really seen a big jump in the number of based aircraft. 58 in 2010. Through the FAA validated process, there are 100 based aircraft there today. So the highlighted numbers here are really showing the 10-year highs. And so you can see from column to column, we've had some recent high marks, and then in some areas, some things have dropped off. So that's just a quick snapshot of the airport. The other thing we want to always look at is, the setting, the environment that the airport sits in. And being in Dane County, there's just a tremendous amount of growth, as we know, that's occurred in Dane County. And when we looked at the forecast here, we looked at 3 primary categories: population growth, growth in retail sales, and growth in personal income. And in all 3 of those categories, I believe Dane County is either the top or one of the top, in terms of growth in those categories. So in considering, the forecasted demand at the airport sits in an area with a lot of growth surrounding it. So when we look at the airport activity, when we look at, what's going on in and around the area of the airport, there's these indicators of demand that come to light. And so I just want to touch on a few of those. So again, through the inventory process, there's roughly 41,000 operations conducted each year at Middleton. Of those operations, more than 2/3 are local operations. And what we mean by local is that when the plane takes off, it only goes about 15 miles at the most from the airport itself. So we're talking about, the training operations, the touch and go type operations. Those are close to 70% of the operations at the airport. When we look at the instrument operations, again, about 3,000. Recent years have been below that. We touched on, the growth in e-commerce, with the airport's proximity to the UPS delivery center, freight runners, and pro cargo consultants. Their numbers growing and daily deliveries, and they make deliveries for area businesses too. One other thing, that comes, that came to light in the last 10 years is the addition of a second FBO, a service provider in Capital Flight. And while it's not, unheard of to have 2 FBO type service providers at an airport the size of Middleton, and it's not a common thing either. Some other indicators of demand, the sustained operations by the small jets and turboprop aircraft. Very consistent fuel sale numbers, the highest volume sold last year. Large growth in based aircraft, and a sustained and continued interest, in hangar construction and aircraft storage. There's been a waiting list, and since 2018, 36 people have expressed an interest in basing an aircraft at the airport. And we touched on the strong growth numbers in Dane County, and those growth numbers are projected to increase. The last indicator of demand is that there has been interest from area businesses who've reached out to the city via letters, and they've expressed greater or continued interest in use of the airport. And we were able to kind of confirm that interest is still there, and we're able to provide letters of documentation as one of the appendices. So. With that sort of background on the activity and the setting of the airport, that's all just kind of, the stuff that informed the forecasts themselves. And I'd now like to just talk about, those forecasted numbers. And I'll move through these quickly, and we can come back to them. But in terms of methodology, we had 2 primary forecasting methodologies we used. One was the socioeconomic methodology, in which where we're really trying to look at that growth in the county, whether it be growth in population, retail sales, personal income. Those are the 3 indicators, and determine, is there any sort of correlation between what's happening in Dane County and what's happening at the airport. The other primary methodology was the market share, and what we're looking at in that methodology is the percentage of operations that Middleton does. What is that relative to regional operations and national operations? And then we're looking at projections, on the national and regional levels, and trying to predict, will Middleton's share of that continue and be reflective of that. So those are the primary methodologies. We had about 5 or 6 different forecasts that came out of those. I'm going to start with the based aircraft forecast. What I want to point to first is the historic operations, which are shown in the chart there, is sort of the black line from year to year. And those go back all the way to the airport's major redevelopment in 2004. And the story for forecasted growth in based aircraft is really that as soon as additional area has been made available for hangars, they've been built, and that doesn't, the space doesn't sit in there vacant for very long. So when the airport redeveloped in 2004, you can see the jump from 40 based aircraft to 60, and then things kind of leveled off for a while. And then in 2012, there was another hangar development on the east side, and then another jump in the based aircraft. What we've seen too over recent years is that even despite, really no place to put an additional hangar, the based aircraft has still gone up, and really that being reflective of the fact that there's probably more than one aircraft being put in these hangars now, and sort of based aircraft being grown that way. So projecting from that, and looking at the socioeconomic methods, those show growth rates between, compounded annual growth rates between 1% and 2%. We also looked at the market share. Those showed a smaller growth, compounded annual growth. Where we ended up with on the preferred method here that's highlighted in blue is kind of a hybrid between regional growth and consideration of that hangar waiting list that we talked about. So we mentioned that, there's 36 people on that hangar waiting list. And this method basically assumed that, if space becomes available, that people are going to act on that, from the waiting list. Now, we're not thinking that all 36 people on the waiting list are going to actually act on that, but we assumed, roughly about a third. And then in combination with that, the regional growth would continue thereafter once that sort of backlog of demand, could potentially occur. So that was the forecast. And there's 100 based aircraft that are now. That methodology showed an additional 25 by the end of the 25-year planning horizon. So when we're talking about, an additional 25 aircraft, what type of aircraft are we talking about? And so the existing mix of aircraft at the airport are comprised of really four main types. So there's single engine, multi-engine, jet, and helicopter. Right now there's 86 single engine aircraft, there's 8 multi-engine, there's 2 jets, and there's 4 helicopters. And looking at the kind of high and low ranges of forecast, what we're showing is, the single engine are always going to be the dominant type of aircraft at Middleton, but the growth in that type is going to be less in terms of percentage than the multi-engine and jet, and that's really kind of derived from more national trends. It's just what's happening in the industry, that you're seeing more multi-engine and jet. But still, there's the single engine are going to be the big players at Middleton. So an additional 13 single engine aircraft are projected, additional 9 multi-engine. The jets are projected to go from 2 to 5, with no real strong growth in helicopters anticipated. So that's the general mix of the fleet that's forecasted. I want to just now move on from based aircraft to operations. Again, kind of looking at this chart and looking at the historical data, and just reminding folks that, if you look at that data from 2010 to 2019, it's just dead flat. And we know that that's not realistic, but that is, the only data that we have, with the exception of the inventory efforts that were done in 2019. And so you can see that jump in 2019, that's all based on the inventory and the outreach to the airport and its users. Projecting from that, we looked at the socioeconomic methodologies, and they're showing, again, the strongest growth. But when we worked with the FAA and the state, what we couldn't show is a strong correlation between the growth in Dane County and the growth in operations. And the reason for that is because, Dane County is going up, up, and up. But if you look at the operations that have been reported at Middleton, they're just dead flat. So we couldn't show any kind of correlation there. And as such, while we think that, the activity that's happening in Dane County is always going to be a generator for the airport, because we couldn't show any strong correlation there, the FAA steered us to using the market share methodologies. And those are quite a bit lower, between the low, medium, and high. Those are the regional market share, the national market share, and then the TAF itself. And so not a lot of very large growth in operations. So 40,560 GA operations today, that projected to go to 44,000 over the 20-year horizon, a 0.41 compounded annual growth rate over the 20-year planning horizon. This next one is looking at jet and turboprop operations. The reason we look at those separate is that, again, jet and turboprop are the real design aircraft at the airport, the most demanding in terms of requirements. We do have pretty good data on the jet and turboprops because by and large, they're filing instrument flight plans. And when we look at the historical data, it's real up and down on jets and turboprops. Again, we looked at socioeconomic methodologies, but could not show a strong correlation there. And again, it had a lot to do with just how the jet operations have been up and down. But we did look at the market share. We looked at, how the operations compared to the national GA jet hours flown and the national GA jet fuel usage, and ended up kind of in that area. So jet operations now in 2019, there were 908. Over the 20-year planning horizon, we're forecasting those to go to just over 1,600. I want to talk now on the design aircraft. As part of the forecast process and approval, the FAA does approve the design aircraft that's appropriate and applicable for the airport. I want to talk a little bit about how aircraft are classified first. So if you look at this chart on the right, there are really two components that make up an aircraft's designation. One is how fast its approach speed is, and that's being reflected on the sort of the y-axis, the left side of this chart. And the designations there range from A to E, from slowest to fastest. The other component of the designation is the size of the aircraft, whether it be wingspan or tail height. And that's designated with a number from 1 to 6, and that's reflected on the x-axis of this chart. And so the combination of the aircraft's speed and its size make up its designation. And so when we're looking at the aircraft that operate at the airport now, and I'm just going to click to this next slide. What we're talking about are aircraft in the A1 and the B1 category, those that are kind of highlighted in the green area here. What you need to have for it to be designated as the design critical aircraft are at least 500 operations a year of that type of aircraft. At Middleton right now, those are the A1 and B1, those kind of highlighted in green. But there are, not an insignificant amount of B2 aircraft, A2 and B2 aircraft that do operate at the airport. There are not 500 annual operations, and again, that 500 number is what the FAA calls the regular use threshold. But we're projecting that it will be over the long term, and they have eclipsed 500 in the past. So when we look at these charts and these diagrams of aircraft on the left here, that diagram and all these aircraft that are reflected here, that's coming straight out of the Wisconsin State System Plan. And they have a nice, I think, sort of graphic in there that we pulled, that for each of these sort of designations, what kind of aircraft we're talking about. So the aircraft operating there now are kind of highlighted in green up at the top left. And what we're projecting is the future aircraft are the ones sort of highlighted in blue there. We're not talking about the large business jets. We're not even talking about, any sort of commercial sort of jet activity. And so we kind of X those out here to reinforce that. Just real quick here. So talking about how many Group 2 operations have occurred at Middleton in the past, this is going all the way back to 2010. The airport did have 696 Group 2 operations as far back as 2010. But what you can see from this graph is that it's been going down. And what we're showing is that, yes, it's been going down, but over the 20-year planning horizon, we think it's prudent to plan and still protect, for the B2 type aircraft that, that they're operating there. And the FAA concurred with that. So the existing critical design aircraft, B1, the future aircraft in that B2 category. And what does that look like? What's the difference between B1 and B2 type aircraft? And we tried to illustrate this in the chapter. The one thing I'd say about the the designation between B1 and B2, the separation really is in the wingspan. And so when you jump from B1 to B2, it's really aircraft that are below 49 feet in wingspan versus those that are above. And so representative aircraft at Middleton right now are like the jet, the Citation CJ1, and the turboprop, the Beech Airliner 99. That's an aircraft that's used for that freight activity. What we're projecting are aircraft that are on the slightly, upper end of that, into the B2 category. So like the Citation CJ2 is just over that 49-foot dividing line, and the King Air 90, another example. So really the story here is that the airport is just, they're on the high end of the B1 classification for aircraft that they're seeing there now. What we're projecting in the future is that they'll be on the low end of the B2. And I guess just a real quick summary of the forecast. We looked at low, medium, and high scenarios for all of these. We know that there's a lot of uncertainty right now. The reason we tried to develop ranges was really to try to provide for some flexibility. But in general, what we used and what the FAA approved was the medium scenario. So again, for based aircraft, the forecasts are showing an increase from 100 to 125 based aircraft. GA operations increasing from 40,560 to 44,000. Total operations 41,342 to 45. And again, just to reiterate, in terms of design aircraft, B1, the existing, with B2 being the future forecast design aircraft. So I think that concludes the summary of the chapter, and it's a very high level just summary of the forecasts. I guess our intent now was to try to open it up for questions and comments. I guess I'd like to start with the one that we did receive. Kevin Munson had submitted a question earlier on. Chair Burke, would it be appropriate now to start with that question and then open it up for others?
Absolutely. Let's start with the first question that was submitted, which comes from Kevin.
Okay. So I'll just read this one here, and Kevin, if you wanted to sort of chime in or offer any clarifying comments, but the question as provided was, oftentimes during VFR conditions, and VFR, for those who may not be familiar, stands for visual flight rules. So I think he's essentially saying often during clear conditions, the traffic pattern at Maury is at or above capacity, which results in overflights of residential neighborhoods. How are capacity constraints in the traffic pattern factored into the forecast? So I guess we had an opportunity to kind of touch on this over the phone with the group, and I guess the answer to that is, they're not. The forecasts are really structured in a way that where we're looking at unconstrained conditions. So while we are looking at the number of operations, we are not yet looking at where those operations are occurring, and that or if there are capacity issues associated with the number of those operations. That will come in the subsequent chapters when we're looking at facility requirements and when we're looking at capacity. So that really doesn't enter into the forecast phase, but I do appreciate the question, because what we are doing now at this point is we've moved into analyzing noise, the existing noise contours. And now that we have approved forecasts, we can start looking at those numbers, using those to develop the noise analysis. And we're trying to build in where these planes are going. So we did take this question to Rich, and Rich sort of verified that yes, during these periods of times, folks are making wider sweeps around, and it would be our intent to try to make sure that we're mapping that and accounting for that in the noise analysis. So I guess the answer, Kevin, and let me know if I can have any feedback here, but is, we're just not, that doesn't factor into the forecast, but it will be something that's looked at, with requirements and capacity and noise.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy that we'll have an opportunity to look at that in the near future.
Okay. Well, great. I'm glad that sounded like that answered your question. Chair Burke, I'll turn it over to you for how to sort of take other questions here.
Thank you. Let's obviously open it up to members of AMPAC. Are there questions? And I am looking. You
Yeah,
can
this is
either raise your hand on using Zoom, or you can just kind of speak up, and I'll try to
Mike.
moderate.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, Mike Frank, you're next.
So Greg, in the summary report regarding the freight operations, it specifically referenced Pro Air and then Freight Runners, but Exact Sciences utilizing their services for priority freight. They didn't happen to be an interested business that we have listed. Can I ask, have they reached out in any way? And then do you have any idea, their portion of the freight that they rely on for the early detection tests?
Yeah, so yeah, I did, I had heard from Rich, that that one of the, and I think, the freight operations have sort of fluctuated on who's doing what for who. But for a while there, I think Sunday deliveries that were coming in from Pro Air Cargo Consultants, I think were exclusively for Exact Sciences. Now, Exact Sciences has lots of different ways that they get their tests delivered to them. I did have an opportunity to talk to some folks there, but I don't think they were willing to write a letter or anything like some of the other businesses were. But was able to confirm that yes, they rely on the airport for their deliveries, and that's all I can really say anecdotally. I don't have really any letter of documentation or anything from Exact Sciences, other than what I've sort of heard that way.
Speaking of freight, this is Bob Bartholomew. I have a question. It was mentioned in the report concerning UPS and the distribution center. 2 points. One is their freight is trucked up from the Rockford Airport rather than flown in. And if UPS insisted to be using the Moy Airport, I didn't see a letter of support from them.
Yeah, no, Bob, you're right. And I did try to reach out to the folks at UPS for that. And again, they did not get back with me or indicate that they'd be willing to do that. But you're right. I did try to reach out to them, but they did not provide a letter.
But they do on a daily basis have next day or deliveries here that are picked up by UPS trucks and are rented UPS equipment. So it's not all being trucked up from Rockford.
Rich, aren't those on Tuesday through Friday generally?
But I believe that we normally see them on Mondays as well, Mark, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
well,
during the weekday.
It's generally Tuesday through Friday.
Okay.
From personal observation, since I live under the flight path, I noticed those things. So it's Tuesday through Friday, usually between 6:30 and 7 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, I'd like to follow up on just a side process question. This is Julie Loeffler speaking.
Go ahead, Julie.
I am having a lot of trouble with people who are on the phone not identifying themselves. I can't tell who's speaking. It would be I think it would be very helpful to everybody to know who's speaking during the discussion. I think that was Rich speaking, am I right? But if everybody could clearly identify themselves, it would be very helpful. Is that possible?
It absolutely is, Julie, and I appreciate the suggestion.
And this is Mark Warschauer. I'd also like that those people that aren't speaking to go on to mute, because I'm getting a lot of background noise from other people, shuffling papers and things like that. So for my benefit and for the benefit of the AMPAC committee members, I'd like people to go on mute unless they're speaking.
Let's try to do both of those options. Is when you choose to speak, turn on your microphone, identify yourself, and then make your comment or question, and then please mute yourself after. And if there's follow-up questions that you have, just jump back, turn your mic back on again at the end of the answer to whatever question you may have asked. So let's try to do both those things, and I think we'll maybe move this along a little more smoothly going forward. So thank you both for those suggestions. So I guess the last question, Bob Bartholomew, did you have any follow-up questions to your question? Okay, hearing none. Are there, oh, Cynthia, I see you have your hand up.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I was muted. Bob was talking and I had to ask Bob to stop because I had to unmute myself first. I forgot that I'm the link here to Bob. So Bob's ready to follow up. So go ahead, Bob.
Well, hang on. Cynthia, I see your hand is up. I will pick on you next, but let's let Bob finish up his line of questioning.
Thank you.
All right. The report, of course, is optimistic and positive. Are there any negatives that the committee needs to consider? That's one thing. The other is, suppose the 1998 referendum didn't support the airport, how would our economy today be affected by it 22 years later?
Okay, so I think there were two questions there. I'm going to try to take one at a time. I think the first question, and let me know, I believe you mentioned that the results of the forecast, in your opinion, seem to be positive. And were there any negative things to be concerned about? And I guess, I don't know that we looked at anything from necessarily a positive or negative aspect. It's just, I think, trying to look at the methodologies and follow, the process. There are some trends, we talked about earlier, and I can kind of go back to some of those slides where things are kind of on the lower end of growth or slower growth, and some mixed activity. I'm going back to the activity slides. The instrument operations, again, the highest number of those were, in 2010. The lowest, was last year. And I don't know that I have a real solid explanation for why that is. But I think there are, in some areas, some sort of up and down levels of activity. The jet operations, you can see the high there was in 2012. Last year, in terms of just looking at jets, was, not the lowest, but one of the lower years over the past 10. So, yeah, I mean, I think if depending on what you're calling positive and negative, there's some different, levels of activity occurring at the airport. The second part of your question, Bob, I'm going to have to ask you to repeat it because I don't know that I picked up on it all the way there.
Now, understandably, this is speculative, but supposing the 1998 referendum didn't support the purchase of the Moore Airport, how would you think that would impact the current economy 22 years later?
So if I may rephrase, Bob, I understand your question too. So had the airport not been improved, how would the economy in this area be affected today? Was that your question?
Yeah, or I wasn't here when the referendum occurred, but as I understand it, the airport and the land would have been purchased, and it's also possible the airport would no longer exist, and there might be something else there, or office parks or whatever. So I was just curious if the airport had not been purchased and improved, what might that have on today's economy in Middleton?
Well, yeah, I guess I appreciate the question, Bob. I don't know that I have an answer for you right at the moment here. I think it's, something we could look at. I know the Bureau of Aeronautics recently updated the economic impact statement, or, the economic, the benefits of the airport that are, generated economically, and you know, there may be something that could be derived from that. But I guess I'm not in a point to really sort of speculate on anything at this point right now. But I maybe could take an IOU on that question.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Cynthia, you have your hand up.
I do. I'll
yes.
lower it. Thank you. So I have a couple of questions for you, Greg. Since the current airport layout plan states that the airport is currently listed as an airport reference code, an ARC-B Roman numeral II facility, why do any changes need to be made to the airport configuration to conform to the forecasted or estimated increase in B Roman numeral II traffic, especially since the airport has experienced significantly more B Roman numeral II operations, more than 500 itinerant operations in the past? Does this imply that the airport can already handle B Roman numeral II aircraft? Protecting for existing B Roman numeral II aircraft airport configuration, yes. Changing the configuration, no. Not really needed since the airport already conforms. And also curious as to why the operations per based aircraft has dropped significantly during the past 10 years.
So yeah, I think two couple of questions there. I think the one really kind of pertaining to B2, the designation of the airport is B2. I guess what I would say, you know, with that is the FAA is always kind of looking at what the current number of operations are, you know, and I think, you know, if it was at one time designated at B2, I think the FAA would always be kind of like looking at the numbers and saying, well, is that still the case, you know, and does that still make sense here? So, you know, when we looked at these numbers, and I'll flip back to this chart here, you know, the tracked B2 operations. You know, the last time the airport eclipsed 500 B2 operations again was back in 2010, and you know, the recent trends have shown that down, and down. But it has been there, and there are still, you know, to your point, there are still B2 aircraft that operate there on a fairly consistent basis. And there are facilities there that are consistent with B2 type aircraft. And so that design critical aircraft is important because it sets dimensional criteria on the airfield. And when we're talking about that, what we're talking about are things like the separation between the runway and the taxiway, and the widths of the taxiway safety areas, the dimensions between tie-down spaces. All of those things are connected to the design aircraft. And to your point, when the airport was redeveloped in 2004, it was anticipated that there was going to be this mixture of Group 1 and Group 2 aircraft. So there are a number of things on the airport that conform to Group 1 standards, and there are some things on the airport that conform to Group 2 standards. One example of that is the width of the taxi lanes down each of those hangars. I think there's 4 or 5 different taxi lanes, you know, where the hangars are located on the primary westerly area. The majority of those are to accommodate Group 1 aircraft. But it was known at the time the airport was redeveloped that there was going to be a demand for some types of business operations. And so that easterly taxi lane is built to Group 2 standards. Likewise, on the apron, the majority of the tie-down spaces on that apron are designed for the smaller sort of B1 type aircraft. But there are a couple of parking positions for larger Group 2 aircraft. So again, it's kind of a mix, and the airport is really kind of on this bubble between B1 and B2 standards. And what the airport and the city, you know, have reflected is that, you know, they don't want to really change the type of aircraft that are operating here today, but they want to more safely and more easily accommodate the larger aircraft. So I think I'm hoping that answers your question. That you know, I think in terms of FAA and what they would designate the airport, I think they're always going to be looking at what the latest activities are. And then in terms of what requirements are that are out there, there are a mixture of B1 and B2. You know, and I think we'll have to really be looking at that when we go into requirements of what's meeting the needs just fine and what isn't, you know. So I'm hoping that answers the first part of your question. the second part, I'm hoping you can refresh my memory on that.
Why the operations per based aircraft has dropped significantly during the past decade.
Okay, so I think if you were to again look at what has historically been reported at the airport, it's an estimate. Again, this is a non-towered airport, so we don't have really strong, good numbers on a year-to-year basis. What operations are at Maury, we just don't. The best numbers we have are the inventory efforts we did from 2019. But conversely, we have really accurate information on the number of based aircraft that are there. So we know that the based aircraft have gone up and up and up, and those are easy to account for because we've got leases and things like that. So again, similar to why we couldn't draw a correlation to activity and the socioeconomic growth at Dane County, the operations there just aren't good historic numbers. So if you're looking at just operations divided by based aircraft, it's going to be lower because the based aircraft have gone up, but the operations have been recorded as dead flat.
So Greg, if I can just ask to make sure I understand. So if I understood you correctly, C29 already meets the B Roman numeral II standards. So why would any changes need to be made other than to the taxi lanes?
I think you misinterpreted my response there. It meets some standards for B2. And there are some things built out there to B1 standards. So again, when we get into the requirements chapter, I think we will be looking from facility to facility what the needs are relative to these forecasts. And I think we may be looking at, how much B2 do we need to accommodate, how much B1. One of the reasons, and I'll flip to the fleet mix of based aircraft, the reason we break out the based aircraft by size is when we're looking at hangar requirements and taxi lane requirements. We're going to want to know, well, how many of these aircraft are going to be larger jet multi-engine type aircraft, and how many are going to be the smaller single engine aircraft, and applying required areas accordingly. So yes, there are components of the airport that are B2. There are some that are not. And those are existing things, and we have to look at existing capacity relative to the future demand. And it may be that, as we're looking at these demand levels, that, the airport doesn't want to address them. All we're trying to put together in this master plan is based on these forecasts, these are the requirements. Whether we choose to meet those requirements is a completely separate decision, but, that's what the master plan is going to show, and then it's going to kind of be up to the city to sort of say, well, do we want to meet this demand or not?
So Greg, can I just ask, why was an operational peaking condition study not explored in the forecast? Day, hour, months?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could do that. I mean, I think that becomes important, again, when you're talking about requirements, and capacity, so to Kevin's point, in terms of, is the pattern congested? We will be looking at capacity as part of the requirements, and I think we could introduce a peaking component there in trying to determine, what's the busiest day? Is it in the summer months? And trying to figure out what that time frame is, and under those conditions, what are the requirements associated with that? But we don't have that in the forecast now, but I think that's something that we probably would want to bring into the requirements discussion.
So Greg, when you said that you're going to do a noise study for a contour map to find out where these planes are going, that's part of a compatible land use plan, it sounds like, and I'm sure if we would get some meaningful community input, we west of the airport would be happy to tell you where they're flying on a daily basis, and how loud the B2 aircraft that are flying out of C29 are extremely loud, over 65 decibels, sometimes kind of ear-piercing. So when is citizen community input going to be taken, and is it going to factor into this noise compatible land use analysis, or what's the plan there? If you could, and then I'll turn it back over to someone else for questions.
Yeah, so I think, like I said, we just now that we have approved forecasts, we've now started trying to look at, what are the existing, where do the existing noise contours play out? What we've been doing to that extent has been trying to coordinate with Rich, on these tracks of where the aircraft, operate. We know there are noise abatement procedures at Middleton where aircraft, turn in a way that's, not the traditional straight in and straight out type of approach and departure. So we are incorporating those things into the model. But yeah, I mean, I think maybe it would be appropriate as we are sort of putting in the assumptions and the flight tracks to make that available to the AMPAC folks and say, here are the assumptions we're using for modeling the noise. And we certainly could open that up for discussion.
Yeah, Greg, actually, I mean, I think you want this analysis to be as accurate as possible in these estimates and projections. We have actual data from today's existing operations. As right today, we're talking about expanding it significantly. And I really think you need to talk to the people who live west of the airport, because they will tell you firsthand the time, the date, the noise levels. It's kind of spot monitoring, but I don't think you have to be guesstimating about this. And unless you're on the ground experiencing it, I mean, I'm sure it's quite a different sensation when you're up in the air in an airplane than for the people on the ground in the schools. So the homes and the schools, especially with COVID-19, I mean, this whole forecast, these estimates were all put together before the COVID pandemic hit. So, I mean, economists are revising the economic projections weekly because it's really impacted negatively the economy, including a push by the city to get people to start buying local instead of e-commerce to help save City of Middleton and other area businesses. So I guess I'd really encourage you to engage with the people who are today being impacted, especially as we work from home and children learn from home. So I know Rich Morey has previously said, well, the flights are down, but the complaints are way up. Well, it's because everybody is home trying to stay safe from COVID-19. So I just would really encourage you to reach out so you can have actual data.
I appreciate that. And yeah, I think from my standpoint, I think if we can take an initial stab at, what our assumptions and our tracks are and try to have the AMPAC folks have an opportunity to comment on that, I think that might be the easiest way to start. And I guess that we do have Rick Dunkelberg on the line with us. Rick, we're talking noise here. I'm just wondering if you might have anything to add to the discussion here, and if we could make sure that Rick could be unmuted.
Oh, I think I am. Am I unmuted?
Yep, I can hear you.
Well, you're talking my favorite subject.
Yeah. Right.
I'm trying to turn my video on so y'all can see my smiling face. No, you raise great questions, and noise is always an issue at any airport master plan or noise study or NEPA document. And aircraft noise is extremely hard to understand because the metrics are really weird. And you're absolutely right in that one of the big challenges at a non-towered airport are determining what we call flight tracks. And flight tracks are where aircraft fly. What the pattern is, where the aircraft fly, and how many aircraft of what type are on those flight tracks. And at an airport like this, we go out and ask the community, and we'll get an aerial, and we'll ask people to draw on that aerial where the aircraft fly. So we've got a pretty good idea of actual flight tracks. If we have radar tracks available from the FAA, we will look at that. Sometimes those are available for smaller airports, and sometimes they're not. And a lot of times the general aviation aircraft that are not flying a instrument flight plan really don't show up on those radar tracks either. But we'll do the best we can. And you're absolutely right. We have real aircraft operational data from the last full year of operations. We then put that information in the noise model, which we have to use, and we model for that year what the noise levels are. And just yes.
So Rick, this is Cynthia Richardson. So I want you to be aware that the ADS-B FAA requirements that kicked into gear January 1 have allowed the citizens who live here and are impacted daily by these low, loud overflights over homes and schools. So we have that data, and you can also get some of it from MSN, Dane County Regional Airport. So January 1 of this year, see, it's much more informative. I would really encourage you to, take that into account. We don't have to guess.
No, well, what we have to guess on is what happened last year, because last year we did not have all that information, and we're looking at. I want to look at a full year's worth of data, because this year is an anomaly. It's not going to show the pattern or the operations or the noise effects which normally have occurred at the airport. And so we will use that information the best we can and then extrapolate that out for a whole year's worth of operations. Now, the issue which everybody is concerned about, and I don't blame them for this because it's very weird, is that when the FAA or any federal agency that addresses aircraft noise, we are by regulation required to use what's called the day-night noise level. And the day-night noise level generally for laymen is a annual average cumulative noise level. And what that means is it averages all the aircraft operations over a year's period of time, adds 10 decibels to every aircraft operation that occurs at night, and they have statutorily defined night as 10 o'clock in the evening till 7 o'clock in the morning. And the reason they add 10 decibels at night is because aircraft noise is more intrusive, and every time you add 10 decibels, it doubles the noise level that the human experiences. So every aircraft operation modeled at night is twice as loud as what normally would occur.
Right, Rick, so I think everybody on this call is pretty familiar with that standard, so thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, so but what's important there is you don't get that in a single event noise level when you use a noise meter. You get what's called a maximum noise level.
Right, but you also have to take into account the ambient noise west of the airport is crickets and songbirds, not city urban traffic loud.
I agree that you should, but the FAA does not. The DNL metric, 65 DNL, is both an urban metric and a rural metric. And it does not take into consideration the delta between the ambient noise and the aircraft noise.
Okay, this is Robert. I see that Julie has her hand up. Julie, you are free to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? I did unmute myself, so can everybody hear me?
We can. Yes. Thank
okay.
you.
Thanks. I want to turn to something different. Table 2.1, I have some questions related to it. I have been listening carefully to everything you've been saying about freight operations. I see that on table 2.1, freight operations increased and their compound annual growth rate at 34.1% between 10 to 19, but between 15 and years 15 and 19, it says an increase of 3.2%. So I am trying to figure out what's the distinction between those two, first of all?
Sure. Yeah. And really that number is misleading, but there really were not a whole lot of freight operations back in 2010. So if you look at that chart, there were 30, and there's 420 last year. So if you're looking at the growth between 2010 and 2019, the percentage is going to be huge. Which is why we tried to look at it, also from just the last 5 years, from 15.
Right. So yeah, I understand. I understand, Greg. Thanks. I wanted to make sure I did understand. So between the years 15 and 19, it was a 3.2% growth. Is that correct? CAGR. That's what it says. Yep. So my follow-up question from that is, that doesn't seem so awfully terribly huge a growth that it makes me wonder why we are speaking of a continued that there might be a continued growth in e-commerce that's going to be coming into this airport. That's one part of my question. And then the second part of my question is related to the Wisconsin Airport System Plan from 2030, which I got a copy of a long time ago. And it says that air cargo volume is basically going to be flat, and that operations are only for the state of Wisconsin are only going to increase by 0.1% by 2030. So I see a little bit of I see a gap between what you say in the written part of your of this chapter and what's in the table and what the Wisconsin Airport System Plan 2030 is saying. I just wanted you to address that for me, please. Can you speak to those?
Yeah, no, I appreciate those comments. So I guess the first, in terms of the growth, if we look at this slide, 2015 to 2019, 370 to 420 operations, a 3.2% growth rate. If we flip over to what we were forecasting for charter and freight, from 2019 to 2039, we're showing it going from 420 to 836. So a fairly similar growth rate, 3.5% compounded annual growth. So, it's not like we're showing something that deviates drastically from what's happened in the past 5 years. But I guess also to your point, the state system plan, the 2030 plan, and Josh Holbrook, I know, is on the phone here. I think that's almost 10 years old now, if I'm remembering right. I think it must have been developed, also looking at a 20-year horizon. So I'm guessing it must have been developed around 2009, 2010.
2015.
Yeah,
okay.
I was gonna say it's in the teens, I thought.
Okay. So I mean, I think it, certainly, the growth in e-commerce was happening, but I mean, I think, it's and I don't know, and I haven't really compared it honestly to what the state is showing on a state level. We're really kind of looking at what's happening in Middleton, and there are some some unique things with the airport being so close to the UPS delivery center, that sort of factor into that. The minimums and the ability to reach Middleton are not that great, and then what we're finding is that these freight operators often have to divert to Madison, but they like to fly to Middleton because it is so close to the delivery center. So, I think that's
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you for just a minute, Greg?
Sure.
I would like to clarify that, because I thought you told Bob that you didn't hear anything from UPS one way or the other. So how do you know that they'd like to fly in? Also, when I look at the appendix that includes all the letters that you received, I think it's appendix D, I don't see anything from the two freight services you reference in the text.
Right.
So how do you know that?
No, that's a good point. I mean, I think it's more what I've heard through conversations, but you're right. I don't have a letter that documents that. That's a good point.
May I ask who you conversed with if you didn't hear from the two freight cargo companies and you didn't hear from UPS?
Well, I did reach out to those folks and talk with them, but they were not willing to provide a letter. So it's more just conversations that I've had
with those businesses. Is that
right?
What you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. No, and I felt like we had to reach out to them, but you're right. They weren't willing to sort of document the need via letter.
Do you know why? Do you know why?
I don't.
Okay.
I mean, I'm certain sometimes they just don't want to be brought into it,
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Julie, was that the end of your question?
Right. Yeah, that's the end of this question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Julie. I see a hand up, but before we get to, it's a hand of a non-committee member. Are there any AMPAC committee members that have additional questions? Cynthia, I see your hand just went up.
Dan Drazen's got a question.
Why don't you let Dan go first, Robert?
Okay, Dan, you're up.
My question will go to Greg or Josh. Does any of these projections take into account what Madison can take in instead of coming to Middleton?
No. I mean, I think we're looking just at the airport here, the demand and the activity that is specific to Middleton. We didn't factor in the operations at Madison or the activity at Madison, MSN.
The only reason I bring this up because we're all members of Dane County and we've spent millions of dollars putting into Madison Airport to take care of stuff like this. That's where my line of questioning was going.
Right. Yep. No, I appreciate the point, and you understand there's another airport real close by, and that's something for everyone to consider as we're talking about the future of this airport.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Cynthia, I think you're next.
Thank you, Robert. So I'll lower my hand here. So, Greg, I want to ask you a couple of follow-up questions. So the hangar inquiry list consisted of 36 people. And that went through February of 2020, as opposed to everything else was supposed to be truncated at December 31 of 2019. Is that right?
I think I just put what the hangar waiting list was at the time we had it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I counted, when I looked at the FAA Airman database twice, most recently again last week to be sure, of that 36 inquiries, which does not equal financial commitments for a 20-year lease on a hangar and an airplane and all of that, 17 were not in the database, indicating they are not pilots. So that would be 47% of the persons on the 36 hangar inquiry list that are not currently pilots. Were you aware of that?
No, I just took the inquiry list as it was provided from the airport. So the airport gets a call, they log it, and that's what we reported. Again, we're not anticipating everyone on that list to act on it.
You said like a third. Is that what you said before? I think I heard you say.
That was the assumption used in the forecast, but there were higher and lower ranges. So, but yeah, it's all based on assumptions. It's all based on the data, and those are the assumptions used in that methodology.
So it would be a third then of 19 if only 19 of the 36 were actually pilots, unless, of course, they're going to graduate like in another week or something and that number goes up. But I wanted to point that out. Then in the 7 business letters of support, the appendices, so one of them is from Capital Flight, which, they're already at C29, so okay, that's nice. And then another one is from North Central Group, and they basically, in the September In Business magazine, had to send out a legally required Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development warn notice that they were permanently laying off 71 employees at the 4 hotels in Middleton and another 75 employees at their other 6 hotels in Madison. And these were people that were furloughed in March due to COVID, and now they are not calling them back because of COVID to come back to their jobs. So it seems like that letter from North Central Group, they're going to relocate a bunch of bigger jets if we have a 5,000-foot runway. Seems like that's probably less likely or not at all. And then there's a letter from Plastic Ingenuity in there, and they say that one of their requirements would be to have an approach at above ground level of 250 feet from 3/4 miles away. And it's my understanding that at C29, even with a 5,000-foot so maybe that one should be not really counted as a business letter of support for this particular airport?
I think you can take it for what it's worth. These are folks that have, reached out and expressed interest in the past. They wrote letters of continued interest, and they outlined what their requirements are. Whether we can meet those in the future or not, will be something that's going to be looked at. It's all, what we're really trying to do is sort of document the demand, and whether we can meet that demand or not is a completely separate decision.
And that was actually tied to the positioning of the ATC towers on Bronner Road. So I'm hoping we'll talk about that at some point. Then I just have two other quick questions. If jets at C-29 are trending down and the piston-driven aircraft is trending up, yet I think you lumped them together, combined in a category called turbine, where the assumption was more and more growth, and again, based on 2019 economic conditions that didn't take into account COVID. So I'm just wondering why you lumped them into the turbine category when jets are going down and piston aircraft is going up, to show it overall up in the combined category.
I mean, the reason we group them together that way is they're both kind of representative of the most demanding aircraft on the airport, and they're both turbine powered aircraft, where the jets, they don't have the propellers, versus a King Air that has the propellers on it. They're both powered by turbine aircraft. They both run on jet fuel. They have that sort of similar characteristic. And really, when we're talking about those kinds of aircraft, those are, again, those ones that are kind of in on the higher end, the most demanding in terms of requirements.
Okay, then thank you. My last question, or comment, I guess, is about the UPS, the freight cargo projections. So I read the UPS annual report for 2019. That's the last one that's out. And I've been looking at, so Rockford is a hub for Amazon, which is the dominant e-commerce market leader. And they have really a lot of cash. And right now, they are starting their own air operations called Air Prime with big Boeing airplanes, and they've got them at Rockford. Rockford's also a UPS hub, I understand. And they have so much cash that they don't care if they lose money because they're going after market share. And in fact, they ended their contract with FedEx. As I understand it, FedEx flies into Dane County Regional Airport. And so they still do some business with UPS, but Amazon Prime wants to keep costs as low as possible. And so UPS is unionized. And the point is that I think UPS and FedEx might be scrambling a tad bit, especially if Amazon continues to dominate and tries to continue to cut out any middleman like FedEx or UPS and keep the cost structure as low as possible, because the residential delivery is really kind of a lost leader. And in fact, UPS was one of the first ones to just recently announce in the Wall Street Journal a price increase before the traditional holiday season, because residential deliveries with e-commerce and pandemic are driving up their cost structure. And so they're going to have a surcharge of up to $3 for ground transportation by truck and up to $4 per package by air, because air freight is really the most expensive. So they're not incented to use the air unless there's a really good reason and the customer's willing to pay. And they say right in their annual report that at some point our customers may decide they're not willing to pay these higher price points. So these are going to be implemented starting mid-November through mid-January, which is unseasonably long. Usually the holiday season is much more truncated. So I guess I'm wondering if you're putting all your eggs in one basket with this UPS facility on Highway 14 being so conveniently located to C-29, is that being somewhat short-sighted, because Amazon is really the dominant player here, and they're starting to have their own planes, and they're big, they're Boeings. So I guess I just wanted to know if you took any of that into consideration with these forecast estimate projections.
No, I mean, I appreciate you certainly have done a lot of looking into that. And, you know, we're really not trying to, you know, steer this in any particular direction. You know, I mean, there is freight activity that's occurring at the airport. We're trying to acknowledge that and speak to that as, you know, what's happening at the airport. We're not really trying to say that, you know, longer runways or anything like that is needed to accommodate that, but it's just one factor to consider in the activity that's occurring at the airport. So I appreciate, you know, the look, you know, into that, and I think that's great information. You know, and again, I think just speaks to inform, you know, how the city wants to look at this from a long-term perspective. So
The other thing, Greg, just that's of interest probably to the group, is that, for example, like Boston Store went out of business at Westtown, and Amazon is dealing with Simon Properties, and I don't know if they're specifically at Westtown, but just in general. There was really some good reporting on this, that they can help the mall operator by taking up these large spaces, this is Amazon, and also be right there for the convenience of the customer, and pay less rent than, say, a Boston store would have paid, but it's better than having a vacant building. So there's this big trend, because this is all changing quite rapidly. There's a big trend to be where the customer is. And I looked at UPS because I thought, well, what else do they have besides Highway 14? I was really surprised. They have a spot in the CVS in the city of Middleton. They have a spot in the Michael's Craft Store at Greenway Station. They have a UPS store on University Avenue. And they have one in the Wolf Kubley Ace Hardware. So it's not like Highway 14 is the only place. And they're really trying, I mean, all of these guys, especially Amazon, are really trying to be where the customer is. So I just thought that was interesting in a rapidly changing, you know, business environment. And I just do want to clarify this July 30, 2020 FAA letter regarding Chapter 2 forecasts. It seems to me, when I read the words, it's a preliminary approval, because it says it does not provide justification to begin construction, and that actual activity levels will be needed prior to FAA funding for these types of projects. So what is the plan here? Are you already working on a 5,000-foot runway design? Or, I mean, are we all going to kind of sit here and kind of wait until we see the construction trucks pulling up to C-29 to build a 5,000-foot runway? Because that's really sort of baked into everything. You don't explicitly say it in this chapter, but it's pretty clear that's what's baked into the equation here. Like, it's a foregone conclusion. So if you could just shed some light on that, I'd really appreciate it.
I guess I'm wondering what you want me to shed light on in particular.
Well, are you getting funding, or are you applying now for some partial funding to start the 5,000 foot to the west runway design, or what's the process? Where we'll talk, I guess, at the end about when, I guess, AMPAC is having 2 more meetings till we disband, or how will we stay informed, I guess, is my question.
So I guess to answer your question, and I'll let Rick and Barbara maybe try to help, but where we're at in this process is the forecast, you know, approvals, you know, so we're looking at demand, you know. And the next step is then, you know, now that we've had the forecasts approved, we have the demand sort of established. The next step in the facility requirements chapter is to look at, you know, what do we need to do to address that demand? And we'll be looking at runway length, we'll be looking at hangar requirements. But, you know, the decision to meet that demand is a completely separate thing. And, you know, we can be looking at alternatives that meet a portion of that demand. We can be looking, and we will, at alternatives that do nothing. And we'll have to be looking at all of those and the pros and cons of each, and we're planning to score those. So I guess to try to address your question maybe as efficiently as possible, nothing has been decided here, but we do have agreement on demand. The next step is, okay, what are the requirements that are associated with that demand? And then the next step is, what are the alternatives for meeting that? And that's the process. And the intent is at each of these chapters to meet with the AMPAC representatives to talk through it. So we haven't got into the next steps and schedule. We were going to talk about that after the presentation here. But that's where it's at. We're not really advocating anything one way or the other. I mean, we know there have been letters and folks that have been talking about certain runway lengths. But we are going to try to look at the FAA guidance. We're going to look at these forecasts as approved and establish requirements that are associated with those, and then develop alternatives following that. So that's the process. And I don't know if Rick or Barbara, if you maybe have anything to add to that.
Yeah, this is Rick again. Let me turn on my video.
Yeah.
You're right that there's always a lot of misinformation about what these forecasts mean. And you quoted the letter, and the letter is exactly right, that this is not a commitment for funding from the FAA or anything like that. And that will not come until, number one, there is demand for whatever facilities or projects could be recommended, number one. Number two, there is an environmental document prepared under NEPA, because this is a federally funded project. And number
Rick,
three,
what level of NEPA will be prepared?
that depends upon the project. There are, as you know, there's 3 different levels of NEPA. There's a CADX, there's an EA, and there's an EIS. And the FAA, through their orders, have guidelines developed as to what level of NEPA document will be prepared based upon what the project is. And so it depends on whatever project is proposed moving forward.
Well, so if it's a 5,000-foot runway to the west, which level do you expect that to be?
That will at least be an EA. I seriously doubt if it would be an EIS unless the noise contours showed a 1.5 dB increase over a noise sensitive use. Then it may go to an EIS. Normally, a runway extension up to about 5,000 feet is an environmental assessment. So to finish my answer to the first question, there has been absolutely no recommendation, no discussion on our part, from Mead and Hunt's part, about any kind of runway extension or any kind of development at all. We've prepared the forecast of demand, and then we will look at facilities which could be required to accommodate that demand. And at the end of the process, somebody, and that somebody is the sponsor of the airport, will determine what they want to do. Do they want to meet that demand? No. Then you don't do anything. Do they want to meet part of that demand? Probably could be. Then you could do something else. Do they want to meet all that demand? That would require something else. But that's not the consultant's decision or recommendation. It's not our role or our part to do that. We can present the pros and cons of each alternative, and whoever the decision maker is then makes that decision.
I have a question whenever I can ask it. Thanks.
Go ahead.
So this is a forecast question, possibly for Greg. You know, in some of these aviation forecasts have been off the long term, the 20-year plans. The last one that really impacted the aviation industry in Dane County Airport was the 2007-2008 crisis, the housing crisis, where 2% of the homes went into foreclosure. And we're looking at something very similar here in February and March, when some of the benefits of the CARE Acts run out, up to 6% of the homes going into foreclosure, and basically, having a significant impact on the economy and the market. How is and then along with the COVID, 60% of the airline air transport flights have been canceled. How is the FAA, and this is the new norm, this will probably go on for years, how is the FAA forecasting, adjusting their forecast for this COVID crisis? Most federal agencies are doing that. I'm writing a risk assessment now for my pharmaceutical company, for instance, for the same thing, and all that. How is the FAA adjusting their forecast models for this COVID crisis? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And you know, I'm not sure I'm the person to really answer that the most effectively. Rick, do you think, or Barbara, would you maybe be able to speak to what's happening with the FA on a larger scale?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, to my knowledge, in discussions with, excuse me, FAA, both region and headquarters, they haven't gotten that far at all. They're still trying to figure all that out. They've been totally saturated with trying to get the CARES Act taken care of and additional monies out to airports and to airlines. They are trying to figure out, they're doing their own risk assessments on what's going to happen in the future. And it's very strange right now.
Thank you.
I see Julie has her hand up.
Am I unmuted?
Now you are, yes.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to ask Greg a follow-up question on something that he said, just to clarify. He said that turboprop and jet planes fly in a sort of a more demanding scenario than other planes. But I thought that there was a real difference between the requirements for turboprop and jet planes. It was my understanding that turbo planes could land, let me just make sure I've got this correct. Hold on one second. It was my understanding that turboprop aircraft have much shorter takeoff and landing distances than jets, which means they have the access to smaller regional airports with shorter runways. So why are you grouping them in the same kind of more demanding environment, Greg? That's my first question. And then I have a follow-up question, if I may, Chairman Burke.
Sure, but let's have the first question answered first.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I think, you know, it's difficult to talk about requirements in a lump sum, kind of a grouping. I think there are turboprop aircrafts that are in the B1 category. There are turboprops that extend into the B2 classifications, just as there are for jets. You know, the reason we lump them together is that when you start looking at the higher end of the size of aircraft, you know, what you're seeing are turboprop and jets. But in terms of requirements, yes, we'll have to look at them, you know, individually, and it really varies from aircraft to aircraft. But I'd like to get back to, you know, what we're trying to look at is that F8 defines that 500 annual operations is that critical number for you know, significant use. And when you're trying to look at what the critical aircraft and what constitutes the operations that eclipse that 500 operations, we were looking at turboprops and jet aircraft having, you know, pretty similar in terms of the size and the associated requirements. You know, so I think that's why we were looking at that. But you're right. I mean, you have to look at each aircraft individually, and it's true. I guess I would concur with what you're saying there, that in some sense we're going to have to look at each of these aircraft as what they are.
Okay, thank you. May I ask that follow-up question, which is on a sort of a totally different subject, but it has been already touched on, so I want to follow up on it if it's possible.
Sure, Julie, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I am interested in the survey that was that's been discussed in this chapter 2. Now, it's my understanding that this is the May 2018 survey. Is that correct? It's pretty clear in the chapter, the draft chapter. I believe my recollection was that a large percentage of the people who responded to that said they were happy with the airport as it was. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean,
any mention of that in this chapter, and so that's why I'm asking about it.
Right. No, I appreciate the question. Yes, I mean, I think if we were to look at that original survey, the POLCO survey, that, you know, I think that was largely to the based aircraft, the folks that operate there now. And yes, the majority of them, I think, when we're talking about, and I can't remember what requirements we're talking or which question, but yeah, a lot of them were generally okay with the airport as it is. But there were a certain percentage that weren't. And again, I guess when we're talking about requirements and what drives the requirements, we're looking at the 500 annual operations. And so that may really be reflected by, you know, a smaller percentage, and generally is. I mean, what really ends up driving a lot of the requirements at airports, you know, are the, you know, the heavier, more critical aircraft. So again, all of that it should be taken into consideration. What we're putting together are forecasts and requirements based on, you know, the most demanding aircraft. Whether we choose to do that or not, I guess we'll have to be determined. But again, that threshold of what constitutes the design aircraft is really what, you know, comes to that 500 operations. So
okay,
does that help answer your question?
Yes, it actually it did. Thank you.
Okay.
So the other question I had is more related to contextualizing that survey. This is the only other question I had about the survey. You said you had 34 respondents. Is that correct? If I recall correctly, 34 respondents that you discussed about their demands for the future and everything.
I guess I'm not certain that would.
I thought it was 34 when you discuss it. It's hard for me because I don't have a computer in front of me, but at any rate, it's a pretty, there are about 2,000 or 3,000 businesses in Middleton, and 30 odd responded to the survey. And I understand that you're just looking at the forecast demand for aviation, but when do you contextualize how much that is compared to the rest of the business community? Because it seems to me that it's a very small number of users of the airport that are actually requesting any change at all. And I just want to know where in the process that's going to get accommodated, because this survey has come up in chapter 2, and that's the only time I know when to ask it.
Right. Yeah. I guess the best way I can answer your question is, you know, again, when we're talking about requirements and the number of operations that are associated with the type of aircraft that we have here, you know, what requirements are associated with that. And I think like Rick and I were both trying to get at is, I think those next chapters are really going to be the opportunity to talk through that stuff. You know, if we have this kind of activity projected, these are the requirements associated with that. You know, we may elect to you know, honor some of that, or maybe we don't want to do any of that. You know, I guess that's, you know, the decision-making process, and the intent is to look at the requirements, look at alternatives.
Thank you.
And then try to flush it out through that process.
And Greg, I would add that the city did not, and the Meet and Hunt survey did not survey all 2,000 to 3,000 businesses, if that's how many businesses we have in Middleton. We didn't reach out to, we didn't do a general survey of businesses. We asked people to give us comments through the chamber and through, you know, other means, but there wasn't, you know, people did not receive a survey directly.
Anybody could have signed up for that May 2018 survey, though. Is that not correct?
If they were aware
Anybody
of it.
who was interested and wanted to speak to it, couldn't they, Mark? That was my
Sure,
understanding.
if they were aware of it.
Yes,
sure.
That's right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other committee members with questions, comments?
Okay, just a second, Bob has a question.
Oh, thank you.
Go ahead, I'm turning you up.
Well, we're talking about the high demand aircraft and runway length and so forth. As I understand it, the Gulfstream 450 is one of the largest business jets. It can land in 3,250 feet. And also look at the Cessna Citation Encore, it needs 2,750 feet. Anything that's more than that, wouldn't a aircraft operator choose to base at an airport that accommodate their aircraft, or they choose an aircraft that can operate where they want to be based? aircraft's not typically reconfigured to accommodate the aircraft somebody chooses to fly to. They choose to fly at the airport where they choose to fly from.
So I think I understand the nature of the question, Bob, and I think I've heard you mention before, you know, a reference to the Gulf Stream and runway length requirements. And I guess what I would say is when we're talking about what runway length makes sense here, our approach to that is going to be to follow the FAA advisory circular that speaks specifically to runway length requirements for airports. So we will look at the activity that we have documented and the projected activity that's been approved by the FAA. We will take that into the advisory circular, and we will present the runway lengths that are associated with that guidance.
Well, those figures come from the manufacturer, so I assume that the FAA probably, I would assume, wouldn't argue with that.
Yeah, and I don't want to really speculate on that, but our intent here is really to follow the FAA guidance on what they lay out for runway length requirements, and that would be presented in the next chapter.
And that citation requirement, that's the manufacturer's worst case scenario for that length of runway to land, which is 4,000 is very adequate.
Okay, well, thank you.
Anybody else have a question? If not, I have one last one.
Go ahead, Bob.
Well, when I was looking at the forecast, I was a little disappointed that there wasn't more information about the demographics of the pilots and the users. The only thing I found, and this refers to that there's as pilots age, they may fly less, and I think that the quote was unfavorable pilot demographics. My concern, though, is, and I got some information, this was from, let's see, let me get the right reference here. This was from actually the Airport Owners and Pilots Association. They have a Air Safety Institute, and they pointed out some problems with older pilots. Now, the only information I could find as far as the age of pilots and how it's increasing, it was from the year 1990 into 2010. The average age of the pilots increased from 40.5 to 44.2. Now, of course, that's 10 years ago, so obviously there's been more an increase in age. And there was a report called the Aging and the General Aviation Pilot that came out of the Air Safety Institute. And they point out some problems, of course, with the aging pilot and possible accidents and the flying and whether or not they're able to even on mental functions and so forth. So that could be a potential problem. I'm thinking of the people on the ground and accidents and where aircraft may crash. And of course, we have a high population around the airport. We have healthcare centers like churches. We have schools. Rather than get into all the details, and I do have some of the findings here, I'll just read you what was their summary. The broad picture seems to be emerged is of a mild but measurable decrease in overall performance with age, offset to varying degrees by expertise, and to the extent indicated by the medical certification. I think it's worthwhile to add to that, older men, and which is worth mentioning too, that only 7% of the pilots are female. I thought that's worth noting. But nonetheless, I think with older males, they have a tendency, more likely to have heart attacks, and that might likely come under stressful conditions. So I do hope that the fact that we are having older pilots out here, likely because of the types of aircraft, recreational aircraft that are being utilized. I know that's not exclusively the case, but I think it's worth noting that could be a potential problem, particularly when you have the airport as a whole in the donut, as surrounded by all these other people, functions, and whatever.
Rich Morey, I think, has his hand up to address that, Robert.
Oh, I'm just trying to, for clarity's sake, every pilot goes through a flight review on a biennial basis and is assessed, which is a lot more than you get for the driving population that's out there. They also have to pass, unless they're doing a basic, well, even with the basic med, they're going to have to pass medical. So it is not a problem that has not been addressed and is not being considered as a flight instructor who does biennial flight reviews. This is an area that we talk about and we are very aware of, and you don't lightly sign someone off as having the skills as a pilot. You make a good assessment and you do induce stress to see how they will handle that situation.
Yes.
Okay.
As it says here, I think as I mentioned that, let's see if I get to that particular citation, that it depends upon their medical conditions and certification. However, you may recall the memo that came from John Halleck, sent to Mark Opus back in 2019. And he said, we have one of the densest airport environments around. And he flew, I'm quoting, I flew about 4 hours with Rick Morey. I told Rich I would not train at C-29. He understood why. Further, that at the end, he said that last thing I want to mention is the airport isn't have an accident that harms people, destroys assets, and fires anti-airport sentiment. He said, bottom line, our pilots need remedial training.
Okay, so this is Robert. Bob and let's see, Rich, I guess both of you, I appreciate your thoughts. Seems like we're getting a little off topic here on forecast usage of the airport now and forecasts into the future. This is, now we're talking, it sounds like, about pilots and aging and stuff like that, and I think that's outside the scope here. So do you have any additional comments or questions related to kind of the scope of what we're here to talk about tonight?
You don't think safety is part of our concern, or should be?
I think it absolutely is part of our concern. I don't think it's part of the topic tonight. We're going to have plenty of chance to be discussing the policy sides of things and any safety concerns, but that's not really what the trick with things with agendas is. You have to stick to what's on the agenda under state law, or we're talking about things that were not noticed in our agenda.
You will ensure that we do talk about safety at one of the upcoming sessions.
So this is Kevin. So that's an operational issue, and it'd probably be more appropriate to bring that to the airport commission. This is the master planning commission.
Thank you, Kevin. I think that's a good suggestion. So,
not address the important issue. FAA, by the way, thinks safety is the most important thing. Oh, I bet I've been muted.
No, you haven't. We're hearing you.
Okay, good. Because most accidents happen within 1 to 5 miles of the airport. So that's all I'll say about it. Important issue needs to be discussed.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Are there any other committee members who have questions or comments?
Robert, it's Deanna Porter. I have a request and a comment.
Please go ahead.
There's been some talk about NEPA this evening, and I would just like to request that as we move forward with this process, that the committee is aware of what those NEPA standards are going forward, and they're shared accordingly.
I think that's a good suggestion. Cynthia, I think you were the one who brought it up, but where would we all be educated on NEPA.
We can compile that information as staff outside of this meeting. We'll respond to that at a future meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. Yeah. Any other questions? Julie, I see you have your hand up.
Yes. Can everybody hear me? This is Julie. Yes?
We can.
I just wanted to follow up on something that Dina said that's related to a schedule that we were given in our June 2019 meeting. In that schedule, it says that there will be as part of the meetings that we're undergoing, that there will be an environmental review that would be occurring from January 2019 through mid-September 2019. And I am wondering what happened to that. This was presented in the June 6, 2019 meeting. Are we not doing I understand everything that Rick has said and that Cindy they were discussing about the FAA environmental review. Has it been decided by somebody that we're no longer undertaking any kind of environmental review as part of this planning process?
No, we are.
Who's answering?
This is Barbara Michael, and yes, we will be doing an environmental review under the master plan.
But it's on my understanding from the schedule, it's ongoing, right? It was ongoing for a period of 9 months. Has that been is that what you're doing right now, Barbara?
No, because of the delays with the forecasting, that has been pushed back. And I think, Greg, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so we are working on it, Julie. I guess I just want to be clear, you know, the extent of the environmental overview that we would be doing. You know, if you read the scope, I mean, what we're really trying to do is identify through, you know, means, you know, existing mapping and existing reporting, you know, the environmental setting, you know, that the airport's in. So I mean, we'll be looking at, you know, documented wetlands. We'll be looking at floodplains. Things that, you know, and we have started some of the outreach to the DNR and some of the other environmental agencies. But yes, when we move into alternatives, you know, one of the things we'll want to be looking at with any change is, you know, what are, you know, some of the environmental considerations with any change here. So yes, it's been, the schedule has changed, no doubt, and a lot of that has been associated with trying to get these forecasts through the approval process. But yes, our intent is by the time we're ready to start looking at alternatives, that we've got a good understanding of you know, the environmental conditions in and around the airport.
So just to be clear, thank you, Greg. Just to be clear, what was originally a 9-month process is now going to be occurring between now, September, and when you plan to introduce the plan, which I think Mark alluded to in one of his memoranda to us. It was going to be sometime early 2021. So that's a pretty short, much shorter time frame. Am I not correct in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the environmental, the inventory and the environmental overview, you know, I think those are things that we're kind of working on leading up to the alternatives. I don't know that it has to take a certain amount of time, but I think we want to do the work to document what the environmental conditions are and work with the agencies to flush those out. So we are committed to honoring what's in the scope of work.
In a much shorter time frame, however, right? Because it has to be. If you're going to be interested, I really want clarification. Is it yes or no? I really am asking this very respectfully. What was a 9-month process, approximately, maybe an 8.5-month process, is now going to be several months shorter than that. Is that correct? Yeah. And we're not going to be discussing that at all as the meetings. We only have 2 meetings left, so at some point we're going to be addressing that within the next 2 meetings, October, November.
Right, and like I say, Julie, I don't know that it's been like an ongoing. I think there's been some sort of starting and stopping, and I think we've done some things to try to pull some data. But yeah, I mean, by the time we get to alternatives, I think the goal is to, you know, really have a good overview and have the environmental setting that the airport's in, you know, understood going into alternatives.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I see Cynthia, you have your hand up.
Just a second, Bob. Robert, I think, is actually trying to move on to that topic. Just a second.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. Are we moving on to the next topic?
I was actually recognizing Cynthia, who has her hand up.
I'll wait.
Cynthia, you may be muted.
I guess I was. Am I now unmuted?
Yes, that we can hear you.
All these buttons. I just wanted to follow up on a couple real quick things for hopefully it's helpful. So Julie was talking about POCO survey number 1. It was question 34, where 84% of the respondents answered that the current runway length was excellent or good. So that's the first thing. And then following up on Kevin Munson's comments about the 2008 housing crisis, and now we're in the COVID-19, which is considered a deep recession. The Congressional Budget Office just updated their long-term 30-year forecasts, and the 1990 to 2019 average growth rate was 2.5% in the U.S., and they just last week downgraded it from 2020 to 2050 as an average growth forecast of only 1.6%. So that's due to the deep recession of COVID-19 and the enormous amount of debt that our country is taking on. So to the extent that that filters down from the national trend to the regional to the local, I just thought that was of interest. And so I just want to make, so this is a period of great economic uncertainty unless and until we get a safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine created. But there's a lot of hardship going on. I mean, I'm talking to our town residents. People are permanently losing their jobs and they're having difficulty finding new ones. There's a big push to buy local for City of Middleton businesses to help them stay afloat. And then my two things. I just want to know when we're going to talk about the ATC high voltage towers on Bronner Road, where in the process that will happen. And then finally, just wondering what the vision is for C29. I know the city is really committed to climate change and kind of a green vision. And we are right on the verge of having all this great Tesla electric battery technology be in widely available hybrid gas, electric, or just electric planes. In fact, Canada's been certifying them and they expect to have one on, I think I read, in the next 2 to 3 years. They're flying them now. NASA's working on this in Europe because I keep looking for a win-win here where these planes, from what I've read, can land on a runway of less than 1,000 feet, take off and land. They would be less noisy, less polluting, they wouldn't be spewing lead into the air. And so I just wonder if when we are doing this planning out 20 years, I mean, in a 3 to 5 year time frame, this could be a quite different situation because if it does go to a 5,000 foot runway, I mean, we're going to be having more impervious surface that's going to be negatively impacting the wetland that C29 is built on. And I'd like people to think about their vision and the city's commitment to climate change in all respects, not just putting in solar panels. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. Any other AMPAC committee members with questions or comments?
Yes, I just want to know on our schedule, when will the community get an opportunity to react to what is being proposed?
We have it on topic number 5, public comment.
I think he's also talking about the city's commitment to involve the public at the end of the, before the plan is adopted, so after it's been drafted and getting public input as to that process before it's adopted.
That's right, Mark.
Okay. Sorry, I misunderstood you, Bob. I thought we were talking within the context of this meeting.
He cleared that up.
Okay. Does somebody have an answer for Bob as to when there will be a public or citizen survey or input more from the citizens than what we have here?
Yeah, this is Greg. I mean, Mark, do you want to talk about the schedule and next steps? I know that was something
the last 15, 20 minutes or so, really there has been very little discussion of forecasts. It's really been about what else are we studying and what is the timeline for things, beginning with the environmental review and NEPA question. So if it's okay with the committee, I will categorize these under the next steps discussion, just to keep it clear.
Yeah, let me just speak to the public really quickly. I see a few hands up from the public, and we will recognize you and under number 5. But yeah, since as Mark says, since we've been starting to shift from item number 3 to item number 4 anyway, let's just finalize here. If there's anything else for item number 3, let's, comments or questions from AMPAC, let's hear those. Otherwise, I think a lot of the questions are coming up now are related to what's next, what's the schedule, what are we doing next. So any further comments on item number 3, the actual forecast of chapter 2? Julie, you have your hand up.
Excuse me, I do. Can everybody hear me? I just unmuted myself.
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to know, in discussing the survey that said a very large percentage of people were satisfied with that, is there going to be, I understand very well your answer, Greg, but is there going to be another place where you are planning to put that survey result, as well as the comments from the public forum, which we all have had access to? Where in the, I don't know if this goes into future steps or if it goes into talking about this study, because this study is being discussed tonight as it relates to demand.
Yeah.
And I think there's a case to be made for demand, including lack of demand, if you know what I'm saying. That the vast bulk of users don't have any demand other than what is already here. And that's nowhere noted in this chapter. So where is it going to be?
Yeah, I think the intent for this would be to take the full user survey and include that as an appendix in the master plan. I think it's been put online, and I think you're right on, Julie. I mean, the whole reason we do a user survey is to really try to gauge what the demand is and how many people are satisfied and how many people are not. So yeah, there's definitely good information there. So I think, yes, I think the thought is to make that part of the document.
Okay, thank you.
I understand what Julie's saying. Julie, are you saying that this process should specifically identify the people who have no demand for the airport that are outside the airport community, or were you talking about specifically just the people based at the airport?
I actually, thanks for having me clarify that, Mark. I'm actually talking about two separate things. First, the people that are currently using the airport, and the fact that in the first survey, the Polko survey, a very large percentage said they were satisfied. I would like to know where that's going to be. And Greg, I did ask about that, and Greg said in an appendix. But I also think that I haven't seen anything. Everything seems to be changing so much. The survey too is one question. A larger question, which is probably better asked in next steps, is what happens to all the other stuff that you collected in the citizen input meeting that we held in May of 2019. So they are two separate things. Thank you, Mark.
And is there any objection from any committee member about my capturing these comments that pertain to next steps under the next step agenda item, just so that it's clear it's tidy for the record? Does anyone have a concern about that, procedural concern?
I think that's a reasonable suggestion, Mark.
Okay. Thank you.
And this is Kevin, and I think it's important that we move along because I'm really interested in hearing public input, and I would hate for this meeting to go so long that we don't have time for that.
I agree. So if we're ready to move on to section 4, let's talk about project schedule and next steps, and then we can get to hearing from the public.
Sure. Okay, well, if it's okay, Robert, I'll just kind of move to the last slide here where we have the schedule kind of outlined. So this was developed, in coordination with the city. The schedule is kind of outlining each of the components of the master plan, the inventory, the forecasts, the facility requirements, and each of these are sort of the major design or the scoped elements of the project. So we've completed the inventory. We now have approved FA forecasts. There's a draft of facility requirements that have been put on the airport's website. But the intent is, for us now to kind of take the approved forecasts, revisit those facility requirements, and update that chapter. And so our next meeting, we would intend to have a meeting about a month from now to talk through the refined facility requirements. Following that, another meeting in November to start looking at alternatives. And what we'd like to do is have that really be kind of a break point that once we've had these alternatives outlined and that chapter presented, that we would take a break through the holidays, through the Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then come back right after the first of the year with a public open house meeting. And then the final AMPAC meeting following that to sort of look at, okay, here are the requirements, these are the alternatives, this is the feedback that we got from the public on the alternatives that have been presented, and then we've been trying to, arrive at a preferred alternative that we would carry forward in the implementation plan in the ALP. So that's a schedule that's been developed so far with working with the city. Robert, I'll turn it over to you for any questions or comments.
My first question, and then I'll open it up to the committee again. I think you had earlier said that things like environmental analysis, EA, was probably under alternative analysis, number 4. So am I correct in saying that that would probably be something that would show up in a November AMPAC meeting?
Right, yeah, exactly. And so I guess one thing to clarify on the environmental work that we're doing as part of this, I mean, we're not doing an environmental assessment, to any sort of NEPA type of environmental analysis. That's really not what we're talking about. What we're going to be doing is really documenting the existing environmental features, things of concern in and around the airport. And we want to do that because as we're looking at alternatives and any changes that may be considered, we have to really understand what the environmental or potential environmental impacts would be, or the effects. So we're not looking at trying to do any sort of NEPA approval, but we do want to lay the groundwork for the environmental setting just so that we can have a good analysis of alternatives and a good weighing of the pros and merits, if that makes sense.
It does clarify things for me. Thank you.
Okay, yep.
I see that Cynthia, you have your hand up. Feel free to speak.
Thank you, Robert. So can I just ask what the vision is for an open house January 2021 with COVID-19 and with that being cold, typical Wisconsin winter? I mean, is this going to be a virtual open house, and is it going to be like the last one, only it's going to be on Zoom? And what's the vision there?
I guess I'd like Mark Opus to jump in a little bit. We put in here format to be determined. I think we would appreciate maybe some discussion on that of what would make sense given the environment and setting that we're in right now. But yeah, I think virtual was probably the idea. I have not personally, but I know other folks at Mead and Hunt have gone through that and have done that recently at other airports here, even in Wisconsin. So And I think we'd have folks who could help me, and try to do that and do it in a good way. But Mark, go ahead and jump in here.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us on this call know, fully expect that we will have COVID, a rampant problem with COVID continuing through this year, through the winter, where, even if a vaccine were in place sooner than later, it's not going to be widely distributed. So we are, from a city standpoint, fully prepared to continue to conduct all of our public meetings through the Zoom platform, just like other units of government, Town of Middleton, Town of Springfield. Well, I don't know about Town of Springfield, but Town of Middleton, I know they offer remote participation. City of Madison, Dane County. We are fully prepared to do that. The exact format of the open house is to be determined.
Thank you. Can I?
Yeah.
Thank you. Can I just ask? I didn't get an answer to my question from like 10 minutes ago. Greg, can you just tell me in this schedule, where are the ATC towers going to be discussed as an obstruction?
Yeah, no, I apologize if I had failed to address that, because I know you'd mentioned it. So I think the best place for looking at that is in the alternatives analysis. We do have very good obstruction data. So, part of what we're required to do with any airport layout plan is to do an aerial overflight of the airport. And so we have a very good understanding of the elevation of houses, of trees, of power lines and antennas. So yes, as we start looking at, okay, well, if we extend this runway, what comes into play in terms of obstructions and airspace? I guess to answer your question, Cynthia, the alternatives would be the place for that. And we do intend to touch on that, because you're correct. It is something that needs to be considered.
Great. Any other questions from committee members related to the schedule or next steps?
I was curious, and perhaps you could clarify this for me. Is the citizen survey going to be separate from the open house, or are those intended to be concurrent?
And I'm not sure if that question was directed towards me, but in terms of a citizen survey, that's nothing that we're currently scoped to do, Bob, as part of Mead and Hunt's contract. I know the city maybe had at one time entertained the idea, but I think I'd defer to Mark on.
Yeah, and we have remained committed to that, steadfast to that plan. The Common Council last August, a year ago, reiterated that commitment formally, as it had already previously been stated. So the council has committed from a policy standpoint to conduct a survey, and I will take my guidance from the Common Council members as to the timing of that survey. But
would I be correct in assuming, though, the survey will be separate, though, from the open house?
Yes, I think that's a safe assumption, but I'm looking to Chair Burke to see how he responds to that.
Yeah, I obviously cannot speak for all the other members of the Common Council, but I would think that, yes, the public open house is not a survey. Therefore, the citizen survey would have to be a separate thing, maybe done around the same time frame, but it would not be the same thing as the public open house.
Good. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Julie, I see you have your hand up. Julie, there you go.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry, this is Julie speaking.
I can.
Sorry about that, but I'm trying to keep muted in deference to the person who said there was a lot of background noise. So I was just waiting for you to tell me I had my hand up. I want to just make a comment about the public participation in any meeting that is held for a public forum. I know Mark shared with everybody back in May 2019, my concerns that that meeting that was held did not seem to me at all like a genuine opportunity for citizens to share comments with each other and the City of Middleton's representatives who were there from Mead and Hunt and other people who were who are city officials and employees themselves. And I'm going to ask that we discuss that in some form. I don't care if it's tonight. I know everybody's anxious to go home, but I genuinely have concerns about how that operated. And I want to be on the record in this meeting as saying, I hope some consideration is given to allowing citizens, residents who are affected by this to speak a little more freely than last time. They were allowed written comments, and I've referred to them earlier. You had shared them and kept them, a good record of them. I don't know where they're going to go in this process. If there's another public forum, however, I seriously am going to be opposed to a similar type forum. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say. It was just a comment.
And Julie, I very much appreciate that. I would like to, I think you're right. I think this body needs to more formally throw out our suggestions about what we would like to see for an open house. So I think that's a good idea that maybe on the next agenda we can talk about that as well.
Thank you.
Are there, let's see, are there any other AMPAC members with questions or comments on the schedule? I'm not seeing any hands raised. So I think I'm going to close item number 4.
And Robert, if I could just make a quick comment, because I just sent a chat message to everyone, and I wish I'd said this at the beginning of the meeting, but it has not been a problem, so I'm happy to report. We have intentionally not provided an opportunity for chat from the public for free flow back and forth, so that we can avoid any potential open meetings violation, or that we, make sure that all the comments that are made are part of the record publicly through the Zoom recording. Chat features can be saved and they can become part of the public record, but they're not available to everybody when there's private chats. I've only allowed private chats with me as the host, specifically for the purpose if somebody had trouble with the technology, that they could communicate with me and indicate that they could not be heard or were muted or whatever. So I would make that announcement at this time too, as you transition into public comment, that if somebody is having trouble being heard, they are very welcome to send me a private message, and that's the only way you can send a message, is to me privately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think we're done with item number 4. Let's move to item number 5, which is public comment. And of course, my screen just changed. I believe the first person who I saw with their hand up is somebody named Gary Keys.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you, Gary.
You bet. Thank you. Appreciate your your input on all this. Cynthia answered a lot of my, or made a statement already that kind of clarified a lot of items I had. I'm one of the west neighborhoods here. We have 46 members here, and I've got 19 people willing to sign a petition saying that they oppose the airport, and that's over 40%. And that was kind of a quick hitter survey I put out. So I think that our neighborhood, as well as many other neighborhoods, have people that are concerned. It's just that, right now we're having a little problem getting everybody to step up to the plate a little bit and voice their concern. But just in our neighborhood alone, I mean, over 40%, I think that's worth looking at. As far as what Cynthia addressed, I think it was a kind of an environmental issue. And I think it was well put about autonomous vehicles, light rail that kind of went away here. You kind of wonder, because of airport or aircraft polluting, that maybe this is why outfits like UPS and some of these others aren't saying anything yet right now, because maybe they're going to be looking at this type of thing. And I think, we're in a demand stage right now, but when you're looking at places like California that are saying that, with what is 2035, they're going to be all electric vehicles. Is the technology that you're talking about updating to here, as far as an airport, I mean, is that out of date before it ever hits the ground running here? I think that's something in the demand stage. I understand that there's people involved here that want demand numbers up, But I think you have to look at it from some of these other standpoints. What's coming down the road? This is a future development that is almost already here. And I think by the time that anything gets done down there, I think that there's going to be some significant changes in some of this, and I think it's worth looking at. And I think there are other items that have something to do with demand that I think should be looked at. Or how are some of these other companies going to be taking in these innovations and not going to be requiring the things that you're looking at, as far as additional air freight and that. So I mean, that's, I think Cynthia's idea is well put, that the schedule is going to be, that you're going to be working on a little bit later is driven by demand. But here's a demand item here right now that might tremendously impact that demand.
Gary, for the record, this is Mark. What is your neighborhood, or what township are you in? What town are you in?
Town of Middleton, Whispering Winds.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate your.
May I ask a clarifying question? Because there's a statistic thrown out about 40% oppose the airport. And I'm just curious, like 40% oppose the airport in general, oppose what? Like
the expansion.
Okay, thank you.
It was a number of questions on the questionnaire about the noise, et cetera, but the final one was really, are you concerned about additional expansion of the airport, considering what we're getting with noise right now? And these 19 people said they'd be willing to sign a petition that says they don't want expansion.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think the next hand I saw go up was somebody, Joe Getty.
Let me see if I can help unmute. That's an issue. Are you there, Joe? Just a second. I actually muted him earlier because that was a source of some feedback on the phone. So let me just find him here, Joe. Just hang on. In the meantime, we do have Danny Ertz with a comment. He has written to me and said he would like to speak. So while I work on getting Joe connected, maybe that's another way to go.
Okay, Danny, why don't you go next?
Okay, thank you. This is Danny Arts. I live on Tepfer Road in the town of Middleton. And I just want to state that I am against any expansion of the airport runway. And in looking at this forecast, I really don't see any justification for expansion. It seems there's maybe a handful of companies that might possibly want their jets to land there. But seeing we're so close to the Dane County Airport, which already has plenty of capacity for other aircraft like that, it's not like we're out in, say, even Rockford, where you're a substantial distance from a larger airport. And I think it's going to have, expansion would have very little advantage to the average person in the city of Middleton. It's not really going to bring any extra revenue, I don't think, into the city. And it's going to be at the detriment to the town of Middleton and the town of Springfield, because that's the way most of the traffic ends up going. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. I think the next person, well,
Joe is available. He's unmuted. Joe, go ahead if you can.
Joe, if you can hear us, go ahead and speak and just start off telling us whether you're from, well, like what city or town you're from.
Okay. So I wondered if this was happening to him. So I specifically see that he is unmuting himself. I've asked to unmute him, and I specifically see that he is doing that he is accepting that, but we're not hearing him. So the problem seems to be on his computer or phone connection.
Mark, I think he's on a phone.
Right. So isn't there like a star? I don't know.
Isn't that *6? I think it is *6.
Try that, Joe.
*6.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we can't hear you, Joe.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll come back to you, Joe, if you can figure out how to get your microphone broadcasting.
Yeah.
But in the interim, the next person I saw on the list was Ms. Krill.
Okay, I've just unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yep.
We can. Thank you.
Okay.
And again, please identify the city or town you are living in.
Okay. My name is Pam Krill, and I live in the town of Springfield. I was just going to say, suggest for Joe Getty, maybe Mark, you could give him your number, and he could call you, and then you could do the same thing you did with Bob Bartholomew.
The problem is that line is in use by Bob Bartholomew.
Ah. Okay.
But yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, I can call him from my cell phone, I guess. But
okay. Just thought I'd throw that out. All right. Well, that wasn't my comment. I actually have one question and one comment. The question I have relates to the forecast chapter, and in particular, the letter that was sent today by the towns of Springfield and Middleton to a number of people, including everyone on AMPAC. So I'm assuming you all got the letter. In the letter, there was an attachment from a consultant who was, I think, hired by the town of, maybe by both towns, I'm not sure, to review the forecast chapter. And there were a number of issues raised by the consultant. And I'm just wondering if Mead and Hunt is planning to, I'm assuming they also received a copy of this, and if they didn't, that they probably will soon, if they're planning to look at this consultant's memo and kind of, respond to these questions or issues that were raised. That's my first question.
Okay, so I know I personally just got that late this afternoon, so I've glanced at it, but I certainly won't claim that I've read it through from top to bottom.
And I haven't either, but I noted some things in the first probably 5 or 6 pages of it that I thought, well, gosh, that would be good to hear from Mead and Hunt on their take on, the issues that were raised. Not necessarily tonight, but maybe at a future meeting.
Certainly. I guess I will ask Mead and Hunt. First of all, are you aware of the email that was sent out I think it was this afternoon, from the town of Middleton?
Yeah, Robert, this is Greg. We did see it maybe an hour or so right before the meeting, and I glanced at it too, but I have not had a chance to really, like you, review it thoroughly at all. So yeah, I guess I'd like a chance to really look at it and kind of go from there. So yeah.
Well, I would just ask that if, Chair Burke, if you're, once you all have a chance to look at it, if you think it warrants at least having it on the agenda for the next meeting, just to kind of tick through some of the things, I think that might be worthwhile, just given that it looks like both town boards signed on to this. And again, I'm not sure who hired the consultant, but just based on my quick review of it, it looks like, a lot of work was put into it. Just obviously a lot of work was put into the forecast chapter by Mead and Hunt as well, but I think it just warrants some consideration. So I would just ask that, you think about that for an agenda item for the next meeting. So that was my first question or comment. My second one is relating to the schedule and the open house concept that's already been discussed. Whatever you end up doing, whatever the committee decides to do, and I think it's great, whether it's an open house or it's a, informational meeting or however you do it, however you do it, to make sure that if citizens take the time to participate, that they understand how their input may or may not be used. Because there was the open house last May, and people were able to put forth written comments, and those were collected and put into a file, and I believe, put away on a shelf someplace. I'm not sure that any of those comments ever really saw the light of day in terms of any discussion among the AMPAC members. Maybe they did, but not at any of the meetings I've attended. And so if there's going to be another one of these types of meetings, which I think is great, you don't want it to just be all for show, so that you're kind of ticking off the things that you're supposed to do, but rather, really to engage the community, hear from them, tell them what you want to tell them. And then, sort of set expectations of what are we going to do with this information that we get? Are we going to do nothing with it? Are we going to try to incorporate some of the ideas that people on the AMPAC committee agree with? Or are we going to, use Mead and Hunt to vet some of these ideas that might sound like they may be worthwhile pursuing? I mean, I don't know, but I guess my point is just to, if you're going to do something like that, which I think is great, go into it with a plan as to how you're going to use whatever input you get from the meeting going forward as part of your whole decision-making process. And that's it.
Great. Thank you, Pam. Appreciate your comments and suggestions. Let me scroll back to where I was. I think the next person that I saw with a hand up is Jenny Pavlovic. Can you unmute yourself? And oh, it looks like you did. And can you identify your city or town?
Sure, I'm from the town of Middleton, and I have a question on the recent airport activity data slide, which it's probably not convenient to put that back up right now, but I think we can still talk about it without having the slide in front of us. I'm curious, I have a couple of related questions. I'm curious that with no tower and with most of the flights in and out of C-29 not having to file a flight plan, what actual local data was used in this activity data and the forecast related to that? Like what actual data from this, how was it gathered from this airport? And I also have a question about whether Mead and Hunt looked back at the 2002 forecast that was done and compare it to where things are at now and how accurate it was, and used anything learned from that in doing the current forecasting. And I would just reiterate something that Cynthia said earlier, is that I hear every aircraft that takes off from this airport, and I have a whole spreadsheet of data. Some of us have learned to use the flight tracking software. We know who's flying out before 7 a.m. We know who's landing and taking off at 11 p.m. So if you need any data, the neighbors definitely have a lot of information that may not be available elsewhere. A lot of these planes aren't allowing themselves to be trackable now that they know we've learned to use the flight tracking software. So there's different ways that we gather that information because we're under it all the time.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate the comments.
So, and that was a question. Those were questions.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. I guess I should ask, but the first one that you asked was about without it being a towered airport, where did we gather certain information for the report? Is that something that, Greg, did you get the question?
I do, and I'd be happy to address that. So I think you were referring to table 2.1 in the earlier slide where we're trying to chart the past 10 years of activity and some of those major categories. All of the columns of data there are generally pretty well documented through filed flight plans and reported fuel sales from the airport, the based aircraft. We have a real strong handle on that. The one thing that we don't know is the overall operations, the total operations, and like you say, just because it is a non-towered facility, those past numbers that have been recorded flat, we know that that's not right. But the best we have is the inventory efforts that we underwent over the past year. Is what took the majority of time to get us to where we are right now, is to try to really dig in. So that really came through talking with Maury Airplane Company. They're one of the bigger operators there with Capital Flight. Maury Airplane Company got us into contact with the based users, and we asked them how many operations did you do in 2019? And we got a pretty good response rate. I think we had roughly 60% of the folks. And for those that we didn't, what we did is we looked at the responses that we did get, and we kind of took some averages and applied those to the ones we didn't. And that was really the best we could do. And we kind of took that approach in coordination with the state and in the FAA. And so, the upshot of it is it seemed to confirm that there are, just over 40,000 annual operations there. But looking at the past data, it's hard to really know how that has changed. My guess is it's probably gone up and down over the years, but all we can really touch on is the inventory that we did from last year. So I hope that helps. The other stuff is all kind of sourced in the chapter where that came from. And like I say, the FAA has a traffic flow management system count database. I'd be happy to kind of point you to where that's at. A lot of the instrument operations, the jet and turboprop operations, the freight operations, we pulled right from that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that's a fraction of the activity there, but I guess you're getting it from different sources. So can I ask one more quick question?
Sure.
Sure.
I think this one's fairly quick. I just have a question about the letters that were provided by local. Were any of those letters submitted unsolicited, or were they all solicited by the city of Middleton or Mead and Hunt? Did any of those companies come on their own and ask for a longer runway or airport expansion? Or were they?
No, that's a great question, and thank you for the opportunity to address it. So yeah, well in advance of the master plan, and I think if you look at the appendices where those letters are, we actually tried to document, the initial outreach. So Epic was a company that had written a letter. It was an undated letter, but it was quite a while ago. High Site company, right down there they had written
the Epic one. I know the Epic one was solicited by the city of Middleton. We have documentation of that, but
I don't know, I guess, but I know the High Site also had written a letter to the city. I guess what I'm getting at, it wasn't done through the master planning process.
Okay.
The other thing I would say is that two of the other letters are folks that are based there now, or actually three. Capital Flight, of course. They've mentioned their interest in expanded operations at the airport. MedX is a company, Dr. Lemon, who is one of the base jets there at the airport. And then, Cynthia talked about NGH. They have two based aircraft there now. But, I think their letter says that they'd like to bring a jet, if there were appropriate facilities in the future. So
that was North Central Hotel Group is what you meant.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, what we tried to do is follow up on some of this initial outreach, and just confirm that interest was still there. And for those who were willing to provide a letter to that effect, we rolled those into an appendix.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Jenny.
Before we go on, Robert, there are a few more, obviously. I have an idea for how to maybe get to Joe Getty. There are 3 phone numbers that I just see phone numbers, and I'm willing to unmute all of them to see if one of them is Joe. So do you mind if I do that and ask the people if that's, or would you rather I not?
No, that's probably, Joe has been waiting for a while, so if he's one of these numbers, let's give this a shot.
So I gave all 3 of them an opportunity to unmute themselves. I presume they are getting some sort of indication of that. And go ahead with your public comment, and if someone comes in that way, we'll know that was the reason. So
okay. So the next hand up that I think I've seen is David and Barb Bryce. Can you unmute yourself and identify the city or town you're from?
Yes, this is Dave Bryce and my wife Barbara Bryce here. We're from the town of Middleton, Whispering Winds neighborhood, on the ridge at about 1,100 feet. As you know, that the Morey Field is 928, so we can sort of calculate the altitude of the planes going over, even when they don't accurately produce their altitude when they start off. And we do have a little bit of experience with the touch and goes that do occur quite often on fair days. But what I recommend doing is the letter that has been written by the towns with the new evaluation is very good and very thorough. And we'd like to emphasize, as the other person that commented, is really give this a good going over and review, because it does contain a lot of information that that may help you determine what is needed. Also, probably what is needed, since you don't really know the levels of operations that you've mentioned, is a prospective evaluation by a non-disinterested third-party persons, maybe more than one person, that could actually monitor prospectively during most of the business hours and continue that prospective evaluation over a prolonged period. And this would give you a good idea of airport operations that you could extrapolate to a period of time, maybe 6 months to 8 months. And we would really be encourage you to adopt the Citizen Advisory Committee from both the towns of Middleton and the towns of Springfield, which I think would go a long way to help repair any of the damage that's been done with the neighborhoods. That's about all I have to say.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, David and Barbara. Let's see. I think unless
Hey, Robert, can I ask a follow-up question just to the last comment?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Deanna.
So there was just a little bit of statistics about the flight patterns and what those are like now. But I think it's important to know that Richard Morey and Morey Flight School and also Jade, they're training school. So is there any statistics to kind of talk about? Yeah, I know I took my driver's test, so sometimes I didn't follow the rules because I wasn't knowledgeable enough. But I mean, are there any statistics that garner the training errors of the flight patterns versus the knowledgeable pilots, their flight patterns? I think I would like to know if the mistakes are being made by knowledgeable pilots or pilots. I don't know. I'm just curious.
It's a good question. Did you have was it directed at anyone in particular who, I don't know that answer.
It's just a general observation and a general question. I don't know that it's directed at anybody, but I'm curious to know if there is any statistics about the flight patterns being violated by new pilots versus seasoned pilots versus pilots in training. I mean, we all know we took our driver's test. We weren't perfect. So I'm curious if that affects the statistic.
So I think I can answer that partially.
I'd like to, I'm sorry, this is Mark, and I'd like to interrupt because this is getting into an area that's not noticed on the agenda. I think we should limit this to public comment only and not have a back and forth discussion between committee members. That's just my advice to you.
And I think that's probably advice I should take. So I think it was a good question. I think it's something that if you can write down for sometime when we have this topic available for us to discuss, I think that's probably something we should do. So thank you.
Rob, again, this is a question for the airport committee, not the master planning, the airport commission. So like I said before, it'd be better if they'd bring questions like this to the other commission.
Okay, that's a good comment, Kevin. So Deanna, I also sit on the airport commission, as does Kevin, and as does Ray. So if you can still write down that question, maybe it will actually go to a different group to try to get an answer to you. Okay, thank you. Then I would move on to, I think, Stephen Kellner. is the next hand I saw up.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you, Stephen.
Okay. I'm Steve Kellner. I live on Pine Manor Circle in Middleton. And my question is about Cynthia's comment on forecasting. With the changes going on because of Amazon, UPS, and FedEx, where will those, I mean, how are you going to put this in the master plan, or is it going to be an amendment, or what is going to be done about the changes in forecasting which come fast, excuse me, fast and furious because of the changes in COVID, et cetera?
I can let others speak too, but my guess is we're not going to be able to capture every changing variable, including what's going on with COVID. It sounds like from what's been discussed earlier, based on the data that is available, the reports being made, and then this body will weigh in based on what knowledge we have. And if we have additional questions that we just don't have answers to, those questions still may inform the policy decisions, but there may not be a way to quantify answers to some of these questions.
Well, I mean, it's a forecasting thing. I mean, if there's going to be some big changes, and it looks like there could be some big changes because through Amazon change and what FedEx and UPS will be doing, it should be at least, I would think, an amendment to the forecasting document.
Sure, I'll go ahead, Mark.
I think what the best thing to say is it's duly noted, and this will be reviewed by the committee as public comment and by the project team as public comment. And I would
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you, Steve. The next one, I'm back to Joe Getty. Joe, are you available and able to speak? Not hearing Joe. The next one I have is a little tough to define who it is. I have someone on my list of participants named iPhone.
Hi, Robert. It's actually Leslie Hayner.
Hi, Leslie. Okay, thank you. No, I just wanted to. Okay, thank you, Leslie. You have the floor. Again, please start off with the city or town that you live in.
Leslie Hayner, town of Middleton. So I have a couple of comments, a couple of questions. I'll just make my way down my notes here. First of all, I'd like to revisit Ms. Krill's comment about making sure that public input is taken seriously. It should be noted that the FAA circular on comprehensive land use indicates that public input must be meaningful. It should not just be performative. It's a requirement. It is not optional. The circular actually recommends that that states public input is very important to the airport planning process. For large or controversial master planning efforts, a task force or committee may be formed by the airport sponsor and must include stakeholders such as airport users, tenants, local and state federal government agencies, community groups, and private citizens. So I just wanted to reiterate Ms. Krill's comment, just how important public input really is. It has to be taken seriously. It can't just be stuck in an appendix. It must find its way into the alternatives analysis. So my next point that I wanted to say is, after listening to Mr. Stern's presentation tonight and having a look at his slides, I still have a lot of concerns about data sources, specifically where the recent operation tallies are coming from and the elements that constitute demand. Mr. Stern just stated a few moments ago, quote, "We do have agreement on demand," unquote. But it really doesn't seem like there is a consensus on demand. I mean, the business letters that have been submitted are either invalid or thin at best. That 2018 user survey indicates low demand. Hangar wait list full of people who aren't even pilots. There's other source and statistical analysis issues to be addressed in sorting through specific data points. But I'm just stumped about where this, quote, demand is. And it seems like it's been really problematic to gather that evidence of demand throughout this process. It's taking a lot of legwork and a lot of effort to scrape up this demand that really doesn't seem to have a whole lot of meat to it. So, I mean, I guess my question, if someone wants to answer it, great, or it can just stand rhetorically. But I mean, is this really what the city and Mead and Hunt have that they're going to put out to the FAA to ask for our federal tax dollars to build something that it really is not being demanded. So those are my comments on demand. But I do have a couple of specific questions for Mr. Stern. Greg, if you're there, you mentioned Dr. Lemon, and I'm curious about him. Can you tell us about Dr. Lemon's business? How many employees does he have, and how many planes does he use?
Yeah, I really can't speak for Dr. Lemon. I know he does have one of the jets that are based at the aircraft. I believe it's the Mustang. I'm not sure how many employees are under his business, but I guess that's what I know.
Okay. And then the next question I had for you, it's my last item, is that we keep talking about the operations data. You keep saying they're flat and quote, not right. You've said that a couple of times. So my question would be this: the city has known that they wanted to do this for several years, and several of those years fall within that flat portion of your data that you claim is not right. So my question would be, why did city planning not think to start keeping operations data during those years so that real operations data could be used and that the TAF would not have to be relied upon? Or did they keep the data but the TAF is better? So can you address why and what that is?
Sure. To the best extent I can. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, I don't know is that the city probably understood how the activity has been reported. And for non-towered airports, it's like I say, it's really a process that's done between the state and those that are familiar with the day-to-day operations. And I don't really know how that process plays out either, but I think it's reasonable to conclude that the operations haven't been the same over a 10-year period. So I think when I say that they're not right, I guess what I'm meaning is that we know that they haven't been that consistent. But through the inventory process that we did in 2019, I think what we found is that, well, it's in the ballpark. I mean, it's fairly close to that 40,000 number. So I can't really speak to anything else. I know when we got the FAA comments about, how are we going to try to quantify these numbers, we sat down, did we want to do counts? Did we want to have this be a longer process? Some of the folks had mentioned that. And I think the thought was to try to do the inventory efforts that we did to try to get a best handle on the operations there. And so we just tried to follow that guidance. We tried to spell out the assumptions as best we could, within that appendice. But it's very difficult. I mean, without a tower, it's hard to really nail it down exactly. So I think we just tried to do the best we can with as much effort and as information as we could.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. I just think that from the point of view of the public, who are so, as you know, desperately concerned about this, that hearing that things are being ballparked is a little disconcerting for us. I'm sure you can imagine. We don't want to suffer any detrimental effects when something is being ballparked.
Yeah, and that's probably not the right word, but I mean, I think it's the idea is that what has been reported was fairly close to what we inventoried in 2019.
Yeah, I just think people want to know. If we're going to be subjected to this, why didn't anybody actually take the care to keep some real data? I think that
I appreciate.
Have confidence in the data.
From a city planning standpoint, since you brought up the city planning department, I would simply say this is specifically why we recommended that the city engage a consultant to do the airport master plan, was to help us come up with the demand. That is exactly why we're doing this. We talked about doing an airport master plan for several years. So that's my response.
To help you come up with the demand?
To help us inventory the existing conditions based on all the requests that we had been receiving over the years. And so rather than doing this piecemeal, we asked the Bureau of Aeronautics to provide funding assistance to do a master plan.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. Again, another call out to Joe Getty. Any chance you can get on the line now? Okay, that's all the hands I see. Is there anyone else from the public who has?
Hey, Robert, it's Cynthia Richland. Joe Getty has called me, and I've got him on speaker if it's going to work, because he has some really important things he'd like to comment. Joe, can you hear me? Can you talk? Joe? Actually, Mark, well, you've got your, I have his phone number. I don't know. Joe, he's having computer issues.
I can call him. I just need his number.
Okay, Joe, I'm going to hang up and give Mark your number. All right, it is 469-1263.
Hello. Joe, this is Mark Opitz calling. You are on speakerphone, and the committee is awaiting your comments.
All right. I thank everybody for trying to get back in touch with me. I apologize for the technical situation. I came home from Fort Andre State Park meeting today, and on the way home, I came 43 through 94. And during that, I passed 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 Amazon semis. Amazon is not about to start flying stuff into Madison when they've got a distribution center into Kenosha, or Middleton, I should say. They're bringing it in here and handing it off to the post office for delivery. That's why UPS is afraid to answer anything. That growth pattern that you're looking at for transportation for capital goods coming in here is going to continually go down because everybody is going to follow Amazon because it's cheaper. These are their own vehicle trucks. These are not any hired vans. They're Amazon trucks. And you know what? When they don't have enough trucks, they'll hire a truck to bring it in. You cannot say that we're going to need it for capital goods coming into the Middleton Airport to go to UPS. And that's what I wanted to bring up. And also, we raised a question about how many of the current airport users were in favor of staying with what they had. And the mayor actually answered that question. He said 93% of current users of the airport were happy with the facilities that they had. So all of that is going to be taken into consideration before we can move forward, because you know the indicated demand is fine if you want to look at it exponentially at normal times, but these aren't normal times anymore. Costs have gone up, and people are finding ways around it. And the people that are using the airport are happy with what they've done. It's not worth it to go forward with it. And that's all, and I really appreciate the opportunity to express this, and thank you, Cynthia.
And are you in the town of Middleton, Joe?
Yes, I am. Okay. I'm in the town of Middleton, right, and I'm on Farm Manor Circle, real close to where Steve Kellner is.
That's okay. I just was looking for the municipality. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep. Bye.
Goodbye.
Cynthia, you still have your hand up. Did you have a question or comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. Nope. Thank you. I just lowered it. Sorry.
Okay. No problem. Are there any additional public comments? Those were all the hands I saw.
I'd like to make a comment. This is Kathy Wolf. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Kathy. Please state your city or town.
Okay. Town of Springfield.
Okay, great, thanks.
And my comments are relating back to the forecast document. And I'm concerned that the forecast assumptions do not include the climate change factors. And so often the environmental considerations get sort of the short shrift and end up in appendices or in, the very end in alternatives. And we've got a really significant situation going on with climate change. And to not have something factored into that area, I find really problematic. We've got an airport that's built on a wetland. It's over a large aquifer. There are many factors. It's next to Pheasant Branch. And without having those things addressed from a socioeconomic point of view, which should be covered in the master plan, which should be covered, I think, in that section, is concerning. And I'm wondering if that can in some way be addressed in a more strident fashion. And the other socioeconomic factor that often gets left out, and I think possibly is occurring here, is what about the socioeconomic factors that occur for all of these neighborhoods? I've seen dozens and dozens of people show up at these hearings. Often their comments are not recorded. And of course they get frustrated. And people who've reported have experienced some negative factors with planes flying close to their homes and things of that nature. And so you've got the loss of property values, you've got the loss of neighborhoods in any sort of a positive way operating with the city of Middleton. I mean, we're kind of left in a situation where what else can we do? We write editorials, we try and report things to the airport, and pilots, get a talking to or something, but I feel like we're getting to a point here where without including the public input in a more meaningful way, people are going to start to look at, I don't know what kind of options, boycotting businesses in the city of Middleton. I mean, what sort of options are we left with? And so, I do feel frustrated about that. One last comment, and that's when the freight operations were mentioned and trying to encourage more of that, or, get some commitments from, I think it was UPS, et cetera, to use the airport more. I read on the website that those are lead-based fuel planes. So socioeconomic factors should also include then the cost of pollution and air pollution, the effects on kids with asthma, and of course, as I mentioned before, the potential water pollution from lead. So I don't know what the answer is to this, but this speaks to the overall issue, having worked on a lot of master plans over the years, of having public input grossly ignored for most of the process. And then at the end, in a so-called open house, where a lot of times the comments aren't recorded then either, you're reporting on something, you're giving feedback on something that's virtually done. And so it shows the comments show up in an addendum. Maybe there's a few things that are incorporated, but it's not a best practice for master planning. So I'm sorry, I know I jumped around a bit, but I wanted to make sure my comments were heard.
Thank you very much, Kathy. I appreciate those comments.
Okay.
Anyone else wanting to make a public comment?
Hello, Robert. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Is this Steve?
Yeah, Steve Ziegler, Capitol View Road, Town of Middleton.
Okay. Go ahead and speak, Steve.
Thank you very much, sir. Early on this evening, Bob Bartholomew made a comment asking the economics of the airport and what economically it brings to the city of Middleton. And economically, what was left on the table when the city did purchase the airport, and the economic ramifications of that. I do not know what the airport has brought economically to the city, but I do know roughly what was left on the table when the city purchased the airport from underneath a developer for an office park. The office park gross taxable revenues for the city were well over $110 million a year in the late 1990s. The office park would have been developed without TIF or city funds. The office park had accommodated 2 recreational soccer fields for public use and city use. The office park had accommodated a trail system for public use. The office park had met all of the environmental requirements at that time for developing in a floodplain, etc., as what the airport did. Economically, that's what the city left on the table in the late 1900s in order to have this airport as a community and city wonderful thing to bring in med flights and for safety and for small aircraft and things like that. Those requirements have been met and exceeded by the airport. Also, very early on, Kevin Munson made a comment in regarding to congested airspace over the airport and surrounding residential communities and schools. I would assume an expansion of the airport would exacerbate those problems rather significantly. And the key thing of my neighborhood and myself and my neighbors being directly, is that if the airport is expanded to the west, which means the taking of the lands of the farms in that area, my land, and also part of the land of the city residents. And all of those people have been here a long time and are going to fight this tooth and nail. That's just no fun to go down an eminent domain road. And so that I know is not a factor in the master planning process and does not seem to matter, but it certainly is a keystone project and problem of my neighborhood. And the idea of the socio-economic impact of benefiting charter planes, flights, and large packaging firms, and not having anything to do with any of the citizens in the city of Middleton, very importantly, and the surrounding townships, and not addressing the socio-cultural impacts, not necessarily the economic impacts, is of something that needs to be addressed and has not been addressed. And we are very frustrated and would certainly like to see this thing brought into the public. And thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. Any other public comments?
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Steve, because there was a lot of feedback at the beginning, and he mentioned an amount, a dollar amount with the Leitner development that he alluded to. What was that tax base that you were referring to, Steve? That's okay, I'll ask him.
I think it was 100 million, but Steve, if you're still on, I think I heard 100 million.
I could not. I've been trying to mute some people where I think the feedback's coming from. So
Well, it could be his technology, because we don't have good cell reception in the town. I don't know.
It's not essential. I just was curious. Thanks.
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, Steve.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
What was the tax base that you said was left on the table in your words?
Roughly, from what I understand, $110 million in the late 1900s.
Thank you.
Yep. Go after me on that one.
Oh, it's not at all why I asked. I just was, I don't think anybody could hear what you said. So.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Any other public comment for tonight? Okay, I think we're going to move off of public comment. And really, that was the last topic of the evening. Unless one of the AMPAC members has anything else they want to quickly talk about, then I think we pretty much are moving to adjournment.
I would move to adjourn. That's Richard Maury.
Thank you.
Okay.
I would second that.
Is that Cynthia?
No, I think it was Deanna.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any comment?
You want a third?
I think we're good. All those, thank you, Ray. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so much for this meeting and your comments, and all of you have a good night.